You never hear the biggest artillery barrage in history begin. You feel it. Long before the sound reaches your ears, the ground beneath you starts to tremble. Dirt dances across the frozen earth. Your chest vibrates. The air itself seems to pulse, as if the world has suddenly developed a heartbeat. Then comes the noise. Not one explosion. Not 10. Thousands. Nearly 9,000 Soviet artillery guns unleash fire at exactly the same moment. The horizon disappears behind towering walls of smoke and flame as more than 1,000,000 shells begin crashing into the German defenses. It's April 16, 1945. The final battle for Berlin has begun, and tonight, you're one of the men marching straight into it. Before we continue, if you enjoy falling asleep to true stories from history, consider subscribing. These videos take an enormous amount of research, and it's always fascinating to see where everyone is listening from. Leave a comment with your city and the local time. While you're settling into bed, someone else might be listening during their morning commute halfway around the world. Now, pull the blanket a little higher. Find a comfortable position, because once we begin this journey, there won't be many comfortable moments left. You open your eyes before dawn, not because you're well rested, because sleeping has become impossible. The earth won't stop shaking. For a moment you wonder if it's an earthquake. Then you remember where you are. The eastern bank of the Oder River, about 60 kilometers from Berlin, the last great obstacle before Germany's capital. You're 26 years old, a Soviet infantryman, one face among nearly 2.5 million soldiers preparing to participate in the largest offensive ever launched against a single city. You've been fighting since 1941. For years. For endless years of mud, hunger, exhaustion, and death. You honestly can't remember what peace feels like anymore. You sleep on damp ground with a folded greatcoat beneath your back if you're lucky. Your boots haven't come off in 3 days. Your uniform smells of sweat, smoke, diesel fuel, and weeks without a proper wash. Your stomach growls. Breakfast will probably be black bread, maybe some kasha. If fortune smiles on you, there might even be hot tea. You don't think about food much anymore. You think about surviving until tomorrow. The thunder continues. Except it isn't thunder. It's artillery unlike anything the world has ever seen. Nearly 300 guns for every kilometer of front. Over 1.2 million shells fired during the first day alone. Imagine trying to count that many explosions. You couldn't. Nobody could. The barrage is so intense that German survivors later describe it not as individual blasts, but as one endless roar. Buildings miles away begin to shake. Pictures fall from walls. Telephone bells ring from the vibrations alone. The earth itself seems determined to bury Berlin before a single Soviet soldier even reaches it. And somehow, you're expected to walk straight through whatever survives. Your name is Vladimir. At least, that's what we'll call you. Back home, somewhere far to the east, your wife is waiting. You haven't seen her in more than a year. Her last letter is folded inside your jacket. You've read it so many times the edges have begun to tear. Sometimes, when the fighting quiets down, you take it out just to remind yourself there was once a life that didn't revolve around rifles and artillery. A life where mornings were quiet, where the smell of fresh bread meant breakfast. Instead of another day trying not to die, the mission sounds simple enough. Cross the Oder, break through the German defenses, encircle Berlin, capture the capital of the nation that invaded your homeland, destroyed your cities, and left millions of your countrymen dead. On paper, it's straightforward. Reality is something else entirely. Because standing between you and Berlin are the Silo Heights, a stretch of elevated ground overlooking the surrounding floodplain. The Germans have spent months turning it into a fortress. Deep trenches, concrete bunkers, hidden artillery, machine gun nests, minefields, anti-tank obstacles, every possible advantage. Waiting, watching, preparing for exactly this moment. Your commander is Marshal Georgy Zhukov, the man who helped save Moscow, the man who broke the siege of Leningrad. Now he wants one final victory, Berlin. Stalin wants it captured quickly. Very quickly. Disappointing Stalin isn't considered a career mistake. It's often a life-ending one. At exactly 4 o'clock in the morning, the guns open fire. You crouch low inside your position with your hands pressed tightly against your ears. Even through your fingers, the sound is overwhelming. The horizon glows orange. The ground bucks beneath your boots. Some men whisper prayers. Others stare silently into the smoke. A few begin crying. Not because they're cowards, because the human mind simply isn't designed to process this much violence all at once. Then comes an idea that seems brilliant, at least on paper. Zhukov orders 143 enormous searchlights switched on. The plan is simple. Blind the German defenders while Soviet infantry advances through the darkness. Instead, the beams strike millions of tons of smoke, dust, and debris thrown into the air by the artillery barrage. The battlefield transforms into one enormous, glowing fog bank. The Germans can barely see. Unfortunately, neither can you. Men stumble blindly into shell craters. Entire units lose contact with one another. Officers scream commands that vanish beneath the endless roar of artillery. Chaos spreads before the first assault has even reached the German lines. And the Germans, they've been waiting. When the leading Soviet troops finally emerge through the smoke, every hidden machine gun opens fire. Mortars begin falling. German artillery answers back. Panzerfaust rockets streak toward advancing armor. The casualties begin immediately, and they never really stop. Despite everything, you keep moving. Because there is no alternative. Retreat isn't an option. Behind the advancing troops stand political officers whose orders are brutally simple. Advance. Or die. Sometimes. Both happen anyway. The Battle of the Silo Heights will rage for 4 terrible days. By the time it's over, tens of thousands of Soviet soldiers will be dead. Entire units will disappear. Friends you've marched beside for years will simply be gone. And yet, the road to Berlin will finally lie open. The hardest battle is still ahead. The first thing you notice is that the artillery didn't destroy nearly as much as everyone hoped. For hours, thousands of Soviet guns pounded the German defenses. Entire hills disappeared beneath smoke. Trees were ripped from the earth. The ground looked as if giants had clawed at it. From where you were standing, it seemed impossible that anyone could still be alive out there. Then the machine guns started firing, one after another, long bursts tearing through the morning fog. The Germans hadn't vanished. They'd simply waited. Many of their frontline positions had been abandoned just before the bombardment began. Their soldiers pulled back onto the reverse slope of the Silo Heights, where the worst of the shells couldn't reach them. Now, as the Soviet infantry struggled forward through mud, smoke, and shell holes, the defenders emerged almost untouched. It was a devastating surprise. You throw yourself into a crater. Mud splashes across your face. Bullets whip overhead with a sound you've learned never to ignore. Not the loud crack. The quiet snap. The one that means the bullet came close enough to kill you. Someone beside you screams. You turn instinctively. A young soldier, maybe 18, is clutching his stomach. His rifle lies several feet away. You can't help him. Not because you don't want to. Because standing up for even a second would probably get you killed too. So you stay exactly where you are, listening, waiting, trying not to breathe too loudly. Eventually an officer appears, covered in mud. His cap is gone. His voice is almost impossible to hear. Forward. That's all he says. Forward. As though that single word somehow makes the bullets less deadly. Around you, men slowly climb from their craters. Nobody wants to. Everyone does. Because everyone understands the same unspoken truth. The only thing more dangerous than charging the Germans is refusing to. The climb toward the heights is exhausting. Every few meters, another shell crater blocks your path. Some are filled with muddy water. Others, with bodies. Some Soviet. Some German. Many impossible to identify anymore. The smell hangs over everything. Burned explosives, Wet earth, diesel fuel, smoke, blood, and something sweeter, something far worse. The smell of death beginning its slow work. After 4 years of war, you recognize it instantly. By midday, the attack has barely advanced. German artillery begins landing behind your unit. They aren't just trying to stop you. They're trapping you. Shells fall in front. Shells fall behind. Machine guns rake the open ground between. Every direction seems equally deadly. Some soldiers flatten themselves against the earth and simply refuse to move. Others keep crawling, not because they think they'll survive, but because movement feels better than waiting for the next shell. Then comes another order. The tanks are moving up. At first, that's comforting. Nothing inspires confidence quite like dozens of T-34s rumbling toward the battlefield. Steel monsters, thick armor, powerful guns. For a moment you believe they might finally break the German line. Then you watch the first one explode. A flash, a cloud of dirt. The turret lifts into the air as though someone tossed it like a toy. Another tank burns moments later. Then another. Hidden German anti-tank guns begin finding their targets one after another. Within minutes, the battlefield is littered with burning armor. Some crews climb out. Most don't. Night finally arrives. Nobody cheers. Darkness doesn't end battles anymore. It simply changes them. The artillery never stops. Mortars continue falling. Snipers become even harder to spot. You scrape together a shallow foxhole using your entrenching tool. The soil is wet, cold, heavy. Every shovel full feels like lifting concrete. Eventually you stop digging. Not because the hole is finished, because you're too exhausted to continue. You collapse inside it with your rifle across your chest. Sleep comes almost instantly. It lasts maybe 20 minutes. Another barrage wakes you. That's enough rest for tonight. Day 2. The attack begins again. Then day 3. Then day 4. Time stops meaning anything. Your world shrinks to the next 50 meters. The next machine gun nest. The next crater. The next breath. Food arrives whenever someone remembers. Usually black bread. Sometimes cold porridge. Water tastes like dirt. Nobody complains. Nobody has the energy. The losses become impossible to count. Entire platoons disappear. Officers you met yesterday are already gone. Replacement soldiers arrive looking terrified. By evening, they look exactly like everyone else. Older, not in years, in their eyes. War ages people differently. At some point, you stop wondering whether you'll survive. Instead, you wonder whether any of this is worth surviving. Then you remember your wife. The letter tucked safely inside your jacket. You reach down just to feel that it's still there. You don't read it. You already know every word. But touching it reminds you that somewhere beyond all this smoke, someone still expects you to come home. Sometimes, that's enough. Finally, on the 4th day, something changes. The German fire begins to weaken. Not disappear, just weaken. Word spreads quickly. The Seelow Heights are falling. The defenders are pulling back toward Berlin. For the first time since the offensive began, you can actually see beyond the ridge. Far in the distance, through smoke rising across the horizon, there's a faint orange glow. Berlin, still 60 kilometers away when this began. Now, it feels close enough to touch. You don't celebrate. Nobody does. Because everyone understands what comes next. If the Seelow Heights were this deadly, what waits inside a city of stone, concrete, and millions of desperate people will be far worse. The road to Berlin is finally open, but the price for opening it has already been paid in tens of thousands of lives. And before this battle is over, many thousands more will join them. For days ago, Berlin was just another name on a map. Now, you can smell it. Not the city itself, the smoke. Even from miles away, a dirty black column hangs over the horizon like a thunderstorm that refuses to move. Every hour it grows larger. Every hour, you get closer. The Seelow Heights are behind you now. Thousands of men never made it this far. Some still lie where they fell. Others have already disappeared beneath fresh soil. marked only by rough wooden crosses hammered into the ground by exhausted comrades who barely had enough strength to dig the graves. There wasn't time for ceremonies. There never is. The war keeps moving. So do you. The pace changes. No longer crawling. No longer fighting for every meter. Now it's marching. Endless marching. Columns of infantry stretch for miles. Thousands upon thousands of men moving west. Some ride on trucks. Some cling to tanks. Most walk. Hour after hour. Your boots have rubbed your feet raw long ago. The blisters burst weeks earlier. Now they're simply layers of hardened skin. Pain has become so ordinary that you only notice its absence. The roads are packed. Tanks. Horse-drawn wagons. Fueled trucks. Ambulances. Artillery pieces pulled by tractors. Or horses, depending on what survived yesterday. Aircraft drone overhead. Mostly Soviet now. Months ago you would have thrown yourself into a ditch whenever you heard engines. Old habits die slowly, even knowing they're friendly. Your shoulders still tense every time. The smell changes too. Not just smoke anymore. Burned fuel. Rotting horses. Collapsed buildings. Abandoned vehicles. Bodies. Thousands of bodies. Some covered. Many not. You stop looking. Everyone does. If you looked at every corpse along the road, you'd never reach Berlin. Someone beside you lights a cigarette. Another asks for one. Within seconds, 5 men are sharing the same smoke. Nobody talks much anymore. Conversation requires energy. Most of yours is spent putting one boot in front of the other. Late in the afternoon, an officer points ahead. There. You squint through the haze. At first, you don't see anything. Then, the skyline appears. Church spires. Factory chimneys. Apartment blocks. Almost swallowed by smoke. Berlin, the capital of the Third Reich. The city you've been hearing about since the war began. The place every newspaper promised would one day fall. It's finally here. But reaching the city and taking it are two very different things. Your commanders know that. The Germans know that. Everyone knows that. Cities kill armies. Tanks become trapped. Snipers hide behind every shattered window. Machine guns wait inside stairwells. Basements become fortresses. Every doorway becomes a gamble. Every intersection, a potential grave. Meanwhile, events far above your pay grade are unfolding. Marshal Zhukov continues driving west from the east. To the south, Marshal Ivan Konyev has smashed through German lines faster than expected. Originally, his orders were simple. Swing south of Berlin. Cut off German forces trying to escape. Instead, Stalin changes his mind. He tells Konyev to turn north. Drive straight toward Berlin. Suddenly, 2 Soviet marshals are racing for the same prize. It isn't an accident. Stalin knows competition can be as powerful as fear. If both commanders believe only one of them will earn the glory of capturing Berlin, both will push harder. Both will take greater risks. Both will move faster. And history suggests he was right. You know none of this. All you know is that the pace suddenly increases. Your officers stop allowing long rests. Every delay brings shouting. Every pause earns another order to keep moving. Berlin must fall quickly. No one explains why. No one needs to. When orders come from Stalin, questions aren't encouraged. Then, on April 25th, the impossible happens. Units advancing from the north meet units advancing from the south. Hands shake. Officers embrace. Maps come out. Messages race back through headquarters. Berlin is surrounded. Completely. No roads remain open. No railways. No escape. The largest city in Germany has become a giant island, surrounded by more than 1 million Soviet soldiers. The trap has finally closed. Inside that ring, more than 2 million civilians remain. Mostly women, children, old men. The younger men are already dead or wearing uniforms. Half the city's homes have been damaged or destroyed. Electricity works only when it feels like it. Water barely flows. Food is almost gone. For weeks, families have lived underground. Cellars have become kitchens, bedrooms, hospitals, schools. Entire lives squeezed beneath shattered apartment blocks while bombs fall overhead. Now, the bombing is no longer the greatest fear. Now the armies are coming. The shelling never stops. Artillery lands day and night. The streets shake constantly. People can feel tanks through the foundations of their buildings long before they ever see them. Some families hang white sheets from broken windows. Others dig deeper into basements. Some still try to flee west, hoping to reach American lines instead. But it's too late. The roads are closed. The ring is complete. Berlin has nowhere left to run. Deep beneath the ruined city, 9 meters underground, another man studies maps. Adolf Hitler. He's 56 years old. His hands shake constantly. His health is rapidly failing. Many of his generals privately believe the war is over. Hitler refuses to accept it. He continues issuing orders, commands divisions that no longer exist, moves imaginary armies across maps, demands impossible counterattacks. Above him, an empire collapses. Below him, he insists victory is still possible. You know none of that. You simply keep marching. Your uniform is stiff with dried mud. Your shoulders ache beneath the weight of your pack. Your rifle feels heavier every day. Around you, the glow above Berlin grows brighter. Smoke pours into the evening sky. The city looks less like a capital and more like a volcano. Your officer finally calls a halt. Men collapse exactly where they're standing. Nobody bothers finding comfortable ground anymore. Comfort stopped mattering years ago. Someone hands around a canteen. Vodka, or something pretending to be. It burns all the way down. Nobody complains. Tomorrow, you'll enter Berlin. Tomorrow, the fighting becomes personal. No more open fields. No more trenches. Just streets, buildings, rooms, hallways, doors. Every single one of them, waiting for someone to die behind it. And before this battle ends, you'll learn that a city can be every bit as deadly as any battlefield you've crossed during the last 4 years. The first thing you notice about Berlin is how quiet it looks from a distance. The smoke hides almost everything. Only the tops of shattered buildings rise above the haze. For a brief moment, you could almost convince yourself the city has already surrendered. Then the artillery starts again. Somewhere ahead, a shell slams into another apartment block. A second later, another. The silence disappears. Berlin isn't dead. It's waiting. You've fought in villages before. Small towns, railway stations, factories. Nothing prepares you for this. Berlin isn't just a city. It's a maze. Miles upon miles of stone buildings. Wide boulevards. Narrow alleyways. Underground tunnels. Cellars connected beneath entire neighborhoods. Every direction offers another place to hide. Another place to kill. Your officers gather everyone around a rough map. One finger taps the center. Berlin has been divided. Not politically, militarily. The Germans have split the capital into defensive sectors. Each one has its own commander, its own artillery, its own stockpile of ammunition, its own orders. If one sector falls, the others continue fighting. There won't be one decisive breakthrough. No dramatic collapse. To capture Berlin, you'll have to tear it apart one neighborhood at a time. Somewhere in the center lies the ultimate objective. The Reichstag. Ironically, it hasn't truly served as Germany's parliament for more than a decade. After the fire in 1933, government business largely moved elsewhere. By 1945, it's mostly an empty shell, a burned-out monument. Yet symbols matter, especially during wars. To Stalin, raising the Soviet flag over the Reichstag will announce to the entire world that Nazi Germany has fallen. Thousands of men, on both sides, are about to die fighting over a building that has already lost much of its original purpose. History has a strange sense of irony. As your unit advances, you begin seeing the city's defenses. Streetcars have been overturned and packed with rubble. Entire intersections blocked. Steel rails twisted into anti-tank obstacles. Massive craters cut across roads. Windows bricked over with sandbags stacked behind them. Ordinary apartment buildings transformed into fortresses. You look at them and suddenly understand why commanders hate fighting in cities. Every building has to be captured. Every floor, every room, every staircase. Then you see who is defending them. Some are experienced soldiers, men from veteran German divisions who've survived years on the Eastern Front. They know exactly where to position machine guns, exactly where Soviet tanks are vulnerable, exactly how to disappear before artillery arrives. These men are dangerous, but they aren't the majority anymore. Most defenders are civilians wearing uniforms. Old men, gray-haired, some old enough to remember fighting in the First World War. Now they're holding rifles again, not because they volunteered, because there was nobody else left. Beside them stand boys, 14, 15, some even younger, given Panzerfaust anti-tank launchers after only a few hours of instruction, told to stop Soviet tanks. Imagine being 14 years old, standing behind a pile of bricks, waiting for a 30-ton T-34 to appear around the corner. That's the reality inside Berlin. One captured German later remembers a unit whose youngest fighter was only 12. The oldest, 73. Children, grandfathers, standing shoulder to shoulder. Not because they believed they could win, because the alternative was almost as terrifying. The SS executed deserters. Families could face punishment. And with Berlin surrounded, there was nowhere left to run. War has reached its final act. Everyone knows it. No one knows how long the final act will last. Meanwhile, beneath the streets, another Berlin exists. One you've never seen. One the artillery can't easily reach. The cellars. Nearly every apartment building has one. Originally built as bomb shelters. Now they've become entire underground villages. Families have lived here for months. Candles replace electric lights. Buckets replace toilets. Bread is rationed down to the last crumb. Water is precious. Every cough echoes through crowded rooms filled with strangers who have slowly become neighbors. No one talks much anymore. Mostly, they listen. They listen for bombers, for artillery, for collapsing buildings, for footsteps overhead. The worst sound is silence, because silence usually means the fighting has moved closer. And eventually, someone will open the cellar door. The only question is, who? Back above ground, your officers gather the platoon once more. This time, they aren't talking about objectives. They're talking about survival. Never cross an open street alone. Never stand in front of a doorway. Never trust an empty window. Always check the cellar. Always check the attic. Always assume someone is still alive inside. Because someone usually is. One veteran quietly adds something else. If the street looks safe, he pauses. It's probably because someone wants you to think it is. Nobody laughs. You continue deeper into the suburbs. The shelling grows heavier. The buildings grow taller. The streets narrower. Every shattered apartment block feels like it's watching you. Curtains move. Maybe from the wind. Maybe not. Broken windows resemble dark eyes. Every doorway seems just large enough to hide a man with a rifle. You grip yours a little tighter. Then, the shooting begins. Not a massive battle. Just one rifle. A single shot. The soldier ahead of you collapses before anyone even realizes what's happened. No warning. No dramatic speech. No chance to fight back. 1 second, he's walking. The next, he isn't. The sniper never fires again. No one even knows which building the shot came from. Your officers wave everyone forward. Stopping only gives the sniper another target. So you step around the body and keep walking. It's a moment you'll remember for the rest of your life. Not because it was especially violent, because it teaches you the first real lesson of fighting inside Berlin. You don't have to see the enemy for the enemy to see you. As darkness falls, the city begins glowing. Not with electricity, with fire. Entire apartment blocks burn through the night. The orange light reflects from thick clouds of smoke until the whole sky looks alive. Somewhere beyond those flames lies the Reichstag. Somewhere beneath those streets, Hitler still sits inside his bunker. And somewhere ahead, Thousands of German defenders are preparing to make every single building cost blood. Tomorrow, you'll stop marching. Tomorrow, you'll start clearing houses, room by room, door by door, and you'll discover that in Berlin, sometimes the deadliest battlefield isn't a battlefield at all. It's someone's living room. If you've ever imagined a city battle, you probably picture tanks charging through the streets, soldiers running from cover to cover, flags waving, explosions everywhere. Berlin wasn't like that. Not for long. The first Soviet units that tried charging straight down the streets learned a lesson almost immediately. Cities don't reward speed. They punish it. A boulevard that looked completely empty could hide dozens of defenders. One anti-tank gun positioned at the far end of a long avenue could destroy every vehicle that entered it. A sniper only needed one broken window. A Panzerfaust operator only needed one doorway. Every street became a shooting gallery. Every intersection became a death sentence. The Red Army had already learned this lesson once before, in Stalingrad, and they had no intention of learning it again. By 1945, Soviet commanders had completely changed the way they fought inside cities. Instead of throwing huge formations forward, they broke their forces into small assault groups. Each one had a specific job: infantry, combat engineers, machine gunners, flamethrower teams, tank crews, sometimes even artillery observers. Every man knew exactly what he was supposed to do. No one wandered. No one rushed ahead alone. Inside Berlin, survival depended on discipline. Before attacking any building, the scouts moved first. Small reconnaissance teams slipped ahead through rubble and shattered walls. They counted windows, looked for movement, watched rooftops, listened for voices. Sometimes they waited 20 minutes, just to spot the brief flicker of a cigarette. That tiny orange glow might reveal an entire German position. Other times, they found nothing, which was somehow even more unsettling. An empty building usually wasn't empty. It simply meant someone was hiding well. Once the scouts finished, the artillery came forward, not the distant batteries firing from miles away. Something far more terrifying. Massive 203mm howitzers, weapons originally designed to destroy concrete fortresses. Each shell weighed almost as much as a grown man. Normally, these guns fired at targets over the horizon. Now, they were being dragged directly into city streets. Imagine watching one of these monsters roll into position outside an apartment building. The barrel lowers. The crew adjusts the aim. Not for kilometers, for meters. The target isn't another city. It's the third floor. Someone yells. The gun fires. The blast is so violent you feel it inside your lungs. The shell punches through brick, concrete, wood, and steel before exploding inside. One round can collapse an entire corner of the building. Windows disappear. Walls crumble. Dust fills the air until the structure itself almost vanishes. Only then does the infantry begin moving. But here's where Soviet tactics became truly different. They didn't attack from the street. The street was where people died. Instead, they entered the first building, cleared every room, every hallway, every staircase. Then, they blew a hole through the wall, straight into the next apartment. No need to expose themselves outside. No need to cross open ground. The Germans expected an attack through the front door. Instead, Soviet soldiers appeared through someone's bedroom wall. The technique earned a nickname: mouse holing, like mice chewing their way through walls. Except these holes were made with explosives. Picture yourself inside a dark apartment. Furniture overturned, wallpaper hanging loose, broken glass covering the floor. You can hear gunfire somewhere outside. Then, without warning, the wall beside you explodes. Bricks fly across the room. Dust fills the air. Before it even settles, grenades bounce through the opening. A second later, Soviet soldiers pour inside. That's how entire city blocks were captured. Apartment by apartment, wall by wall. The flamethrowers came next. Few weapons inspired more fear. Not because they were especially sophisticated, because everyone understood exactly what they did. The roar alone could convince defenders to surrender. Sometimes, other times, nothing could, especially inside Berlin. Many German soldiers believed surrender meant death anyway. So they stayed. They fought until there was nothing left to fight with. The tanks adapted too. Instead of driving proudly down the middle of the street, they hugged the buildings, keeping as much concrete between themselves and enemy anti-tank weapons as possible. Submachine gunners rode on top of the hulls. Their job wasn't precision. It was suppression. Every window, every doorway, every rooftop. If it looked capable of hiding someone, they fired into it. Not because they knew an enemy was there, because they couldn't afford to assume otherwise. Progress became painfully slow. One block, then another. Sometimes an entire day passed, and the front line advanced less than 100 meters. Maps hardly changed. The casualty lists did. Inside each captured building, the same pattern repeated. Smoke, dust, broken furniture, shattered family photographs, children's toys scattered across the floor, dinner tables still set, as though someone expected to come back. War has a strange habit of freezing ordinary life. At the exact moment everything falls apart. Down in the cellars, families waited, pressed tightly against damp concrete walls. Parents trying to keep children quiet. Everyone listening. First, the artillery. Then, the machine guns. Then, the footsteps. The footsteps were always the worst, because footsteps meant soldiers. And soldiers meant uncertainty. No one knew who would open the cellar door, or what would happen afterward. So they waited, sometimes for hours, sometimes for days, praying the next knock wasn't their turn. By the end of April, the Soviet ring around Berlin had tightened completely. No supplies entered the city. No reinforcements escaped. The defenders were slowly being squeezed toward the center, toward the government district, toward the Reichstag, toward Hitler's bunker. The battle wasn't ending. It was concentrating, like a fire consuming everything until only its hottest point remained. One evening, after another exhausting day of clearing buildings, you finally find a quiet corner inside a ruined apartment. For the first time in days, no one is shooting. You pull a tiny stub of pencil from your pocket, then a folded piece of paper. Your wife. You promised yourself you'd write whenever you had the chance. You don't know if the letter will ever leave Berlin. You don't even know if you'll survive long enough to finish it. But writing feels important. It reminds you that somewhere beyond this burning city, a normal life still exists. You tell her you're alive. You tell her you're healthy, or healthy enough. You tell her the end is close. You don't tell her about the buildings collapsing, or the friends you've buried, or the smell that never leaves your uniform. Some things are kinder left unwritten. You fold the letter carefully, slip it back into your pocket. Tomorrow, you'll march toward the building everyone has been talking about since the offensive began. The Reichstag, the symbol, the prize, the place where history and thousands more lives are about to collide. By now, Berlin is no longer a city. It's a battlefield with street names. Every landmark that once guided people through the capital now serves a different purpose. A church steeple isn't a place of worship. It's a sniper's nest. A school isn't filled with children. It's an ammunition dump. A subway entrance isn't transportation. It's another way for soldiers to appear where no one expects them. Every familiar place has become something dangerous. Your unit has been fighting for days without a real break. You honestly can't remember what day of the week it is anymore. Only that every sunrise brings another block to capture, and every sunset leaves fewer men standing beside you. You stop asking where the replacements come from, because the replacements stop asking where the veterans went. Everyone already knows the answer. Ahead, the government district comes into view, even through the smoke. You recognize it. The buildings are larger here, heavier, made of thick stone designed to project power. Ironically, that same stone now makes them excellent fortresses. The Germans have withdrawn toward the center exactly as Soviet commanders expected. They're giving up neighborhoods, giving up apartments, giving up factories. saving their strength for the final stand. Then someone points ahead. There. You follow his finger. At first, it doesn't seem especially impressive. A battered building, blackened by fire, scarred by shell impacts, windows shattered, smoke drifting from its roof. This is the Reichstag, the building you've heard about for weeks. The building Stalin once captured before May 1st. The building every Soviet newspaper has already turned into a symbol of victory. From this distance, it almost looks abandoned. It isn't. German engineers have transformed it into a fortress. The windows are bricked over. Sandbags reinforce every opening. Machine guns cover every approach. Inside, hundreds of defenders wait. Some are experienced SS soldiers. Others are sailors with nowhere left to sail. Others belong to shattered army units collected from across the city. Different uniforms, different commanders. One purpose: hold the Reichstag for as long as possible. Between you and the building, nothing is simple. The Spree River cuts across the battlefield. Every bridge leading toward the Reichstag has become a killing ground. The Germans mined them, covered them with machine guns, positioned anti-tank weapons where they command every approach. To reach the Reichstag, you first have to survive the bridges. And then there's another problem. Right in front of the building, a massive flooded construction site. Before the war, workers had been expanding Berlin's subway system. Now the unfinished excavation has become an accidental moat. Water fills the pit. Mud surrounds it. Any attack must funnel around its edges, exactly where German guns are waiting. Sometimes, history's greatest obstacles aren't planned at all. They're accidents. The closer you get, the stranger the battlefield becomes. You pass elegant government buildings reduced to empty shells. Grand hotels now filled with wounded soldiers. Embassies with their walls blown apart. Marble staircases covered in rubble. Paintings burned black by fire. Everywhere you look, the symbols of a powerful nation are collapsing. Not slowly, all at once. Your platoon halts inside the remains of an office building. The roof is gone. Rain drips through exposed beams. Someone passes around bread so stale, it could almost be used as a weapon. Nobody laughs. Humor has become rare. Exhaustion leaves little room for it. One of the older soldiers quietly lights a cigarette. He stares toward the Reichstag for a long time before speaking. You know, he says softly, I don't think any of us imagined we'd actually make it this far. No one answers, because everyone is thinking exactly the same thing. Across the city, the people hiding underground hear the battle moving closer. The cellars shake almost constantly now. Dust falls from the ceilings with every explosion. Candles flicker. Children cling to their mothers. Nobody really talks anymore. They simply wait. Every sound matters. A burst of machine gun fire. Boots running overhead. A collapsing wall. Somewhere nearby, someone screams. Then, silence. No one wants to know why. Deep beneath the Reich Chancellery, Hitler continues giving orders. Maps cover the tables. Staff officers move tiny unit markers that represent divisions which barely exist anymore. Counterattacks are ordered. Relief forces are expected. Miracles are discussed. Outside, none of it matters. The Soviet army is already inside Berlin. Every hour, the ring grows tighter. Every hour, another building falls. Back on the streets, your officers begin explaining tomorrow's assault. No dramatic speeches, just instructions. Stay close to the walls. Never outrun the tanks. Watch the rooftops. Check every doorway twice. And if someone throws a grenade, don't think. Move. Because thinking takes longer than exploding. As darkness settles across Berlin, the fires grow brighter. The smoke glows orange beneath the night sky. Artillery flashes illuminate entire neighborhoods for a split second, then disappear again. The city seems alive, breathing, burning, dying. You lean against a broken wall. Your rifle rests across your knees. Somewhere in your pocket, your unfinished letter waits. You think about taking it out, adding one more sentence. Instead, you simply close your eyes. Not to sleep, just to rest them. Tomorrow, you'll cross those bridges. Tomorrow, you'll fight for the Reichstag. Tomorrow, you'll step into one of the most famous battles in military history. And somewhere inside that burning city, history is preparing to write its final chapter. One room, one staircase, and one life at a time. Before dawn, someone shakes your shoulder. No shouting, no whistle, just a quiet hand pulling you awake. For a few seconds, you forget where you are. Then the smell reminds you. Smoke, dust, burned brick, cordite, Berlin. You climb to your feet. Your back protests immediately. Your legs feel stiff. Your boots are still damp from yesterday. No one bothers washing anymore. The city has stripped life down to its simplest form. Can you keep moving? Can you keep fighting? Can you survive until tomorrow? Everything else has stopped mattering. Outside, the sky is still dark. Only the fires provide light. Entire city blocks glow red beneath thick clouds of smoke. The horizon flickers constantly as artillery lands somewhere ahead. You don't hear individual explosions anymore. Just one endless rumble, like distant thunder that never moves away. Your platoon begins advancing before sunrise. The streets are strangely empty. Not peaceful. Empty. Every window feels occupied. Every rooftop watched. You find yourself staring at shattered buildings, trying to decide which one would make the perfect sniper position. The problem is, they all would. Then you reach the bridge, or what's left of it. The stone arches are cracked. The roadway is scarred by shell impacts. Twisted steel sticks out through broken concrete. German engineers tried destroying it. They didn't quite succeed. Now both armies are fighting over the ruins. The bridge has become the only practical way forward, which means everyone knows exactly where you're coming. The tanks move first, slowly, painfully slowly. Each commander knows that one hidden Panzerfaust could turn the lead vehicle into a burning roadblock. Infantry spreads along both sides. Your job isn't to lead. It's to watch the buildings. Every doorway, every window, every hole blasted through every wall. Halfway across, someone shouts, "Right!" Instinct takes over before your brain catches up. You throw yourself against the stone railing. A rocket streaks across the bridge. It misses the first tank by less than a meter. Instead, it slams into the second. The explosion punches a bright orange fireball into the morning air. The turret shakes violently. Flames pour from every hatch. The crew tries climbing out. Only one makes it. He stumbles a few steps, then collapses without another sound. The bridge disappears beneath machine gun fire. No one stops. Stopping is exactly what the Germans want. The surviving tanks increase their speed. Infantry runs between bursts of gunfire. Smoke grenades explode across the bridge, covering everything in thick white clouds. For several terrifying moments, you can't see anything. Not your squad. Not the tanks. Not even your own boots. Only the sound remains. Bullets snapping through smoke. Men shouting. Engines roaring. Metal striking stone. Somewhere nearby, someone cries for a medic. The voice disappears almost immediately beneath another explosion. Then, as quickly as it began, it's over. You stumble off the far side of the bridge. Still breathing. Your heart pounds so hard it feels like it's trying to escape your chest. You count the men around you. There are fewer than before. Nobody says their names. Nobody needs to. The fighting becomes even closer now. The streets narrow. Buildings rise on both sides. The tanks can barely turn without scraping walls. Perfect conditions for ambushes. Perfect conditions for defenders who know every street by memory. Your platoon enters another apartment building. The front entrance has already been blasted open. Broken furniture litters the hallway. Wallpaper hangs in long strips from cracked walls. Family photographs still sit on shelves, covered in gray dust. A child's bicycle lies upside down near the staircase. Its front wheel spins slowly. No one touches it. The engineers move ahead. One soldier kneels beside a wall separating this apartment from the next. He places several blocks of explosive. Everyone backs away. Someone counts silently with their fingers. The blast shakes the entire building. Dust pours from the ceiling. When it clears, there's a jagged opening large enough for a man to crawl through. No front door. No hallway. Straight through the wall. Mouse holing. Again and again. Apartment after apartment. Every room is different. One still has breakfast on the table. Another contains nothing but shattered glass. One bedroom is untouched except for a blanket neatly folded across the bed. It feels wrong, as though the family simply stepped outside for a moment, expecting to return. War freezes ordinary moments forever. Then, a burst of automatic fire erupts from somewhere above. Everyone dives for cover. The Germans are in the attic. Grenades go up the staircase. One, then another. The explosions shake loose plaster from the ceiling. Silence. For 2 seconds. Then more gunfire. Closer this time. The fight lasts less than 5 minutes. It feels like an hour. When it's over, the attic is quiet. You climb the stairs carefully. Inside, you find 3 German defenders, 1 veteran soldier, and 2 boys. Neither looks old enough to shave. One still wears the oversized helmet of the Hitler Youth. His uniform hangs loosely over narrow shoulders. For a moment, it's difficult to remember which side he was fighting for. All you see is a child who should have been sitting in a classroom instead of defending an attic with a rifle. War has a way of making everyone lose, even before it's over. Outside, the artillery begins again. The Reichstag is only a short distance away now, close enough that you can hear heavy fighting echoing through the government district. Close enough to see the upper walls between drifting clouds of smoke. The final objective is no longer somewhere in the city. It's right in front of you. Every surviving soldier knows it. Every German defender knows it too. And that's exactly why the next few hundred meters will become some of the bloodiest of the entire battle. By the time you finally reach the Reichstag, it barely resembles the photographs you've seen. The Great Dome is scarred by shellfire. Columns are chipped and blackened. The stone facade is pockmarked with thousands of bullet holes. Smoke curls from shattered windows like the building itself is breathing. For years, it stood as one of Germany's grandest landmarks. Now, it looks like the ruins of an ancient civilization. And yet, it's still standing. The open ground in front of the building is the real problem. The Germans have stripped away nearly every piece of cover. Statues lie broken. Trees have been blasted apart. What remains is a wide expanse of rubble and shattered stone. To cross it, you'll have to expose yourself. The defenders know that. They've spent days preparing for exactly this moment. Machine guns are hidden behind sandbags inside the lower windows. Snipers watch from the upper floors. Anti-tank guns cover the approaches. Every angle overlaps another. The Reichstag has become a fortress designed to punish anyone reckless enough to attack it head-on. Unfortunately, there's no other way. Your commander checks his watch. The artillery barrage begins. The sound is almost impossible to describe. Thousands of Soviet guns open fire together. The ground vibrates beneath your boots. The air itself seems to ripple. Massive shells slam into the Reichstag over and over again. Stone columns explode into clouds of dust. Windows disappear. Roof tiles rain onto the streets below. For nearly half an hour, the building simply vanishes behind smoke. Some soldiers dare to hope. Surely, nothing inside could still be alive. Then the barrage lifts, and the machine guns begin firing again. Exactly as before, the order comes. Forward. Nobody hesitates. Because hesitation out here is fatal. You leave the shelter of the nearby buildings and sprint across the open ground. Almost immediately, bullets begin snapping overhead. Stone chips explode from statues beside you. Someone falls. You don't look back. Another explosion throws dirt into the air. Your ears ring so loudly you can't hear your own breathing. Everything becomes instinct. Run. Drop. Run again. AT-34 rumbles past on your left. Its main gun fires directly into one of the Reichstag's entrances. The shell blows apart the doorway. Before the dust settles, German anti-tank rockets streak toward the tank. One misses. Another strikes the side armor. The vehicle shudders violently. Smoke pours from the engine compartment. The crew climbs out under heavy fire. Only two reach cover. You throw yourself behind a broken section of marble. The Reichstag now towers above you. It's much larger than you imagined. The columns stretch high overhead. The entrance feels less like the doorway to a building, and more like the entrance to a mountain. German machine guns continue firing from somewhere inside. You can't see them, only the flashes. Engineers crawl forward carrying satchels of explosives. One reaches the steps. Another doesn't. The surviving engineer places the charges against a barricaded entrance. He barely has time to dive away before the explosion tears the doors apart. Dust erupts into the air. For one brief moment, the way inside is open. The infantry surges forward. Grenades fly through the entrance. Then another wave. Then another. The echoes roll through the massive halls inside the building. You follow the men ahead of you. Crossing the threshold feels strangely significant. After everything you've survived, you're finally inside the Reichstag. The interior is almost completely dark. Electricity failed long ago. Smoke drifts through enormous hallways. Marble floors are buried beneath broken plaster. Pieces of the ceiling lie scattered everywhere. Every footstep echoes. Every shadow looks dangerous. The Germans know the building better than you do. They've barricaded staircases with furniture. Machine guns cover long corridors. Snipers wait behind collapsed walls. The fighting becomes unbelievably close. Sometimes, the distance between both sides is less than the length of a dining table. Grenades become the most important weapon. A room is never entered first. A grenade enters first. Only after the explosion do soldiers follow. Room after room, hallway after hallway. The process repeats endlessly. Throw, wait, enter, clear, move. Again and again, the staircases become bottlenecks. Every flight upward is defended. German soldiers roll grenades down from higher floors. Soviet troops throw them back whenever they can. Sometimes, both explode at once. The blasts shake dust from the ceilings like heavy rain. The air grows thicker with every minute. Breathing becomes difficult. Seeing becomes harder. Fighting never slows. At one landing, your squad pauses beside a shattered window. Outside, Berlin burns. Entire neighborhoods are hidden beneath smoke. Columns of Soviet armor continue moving through the streets below. Farther away, artillery flashes illuminate the skyline. The whole city seems caught inside one endless explosion. You only look for a second. Then someone shouts. The fight resumes. Hours pass. Maybe. It's impossible to tell anymore. Inside the Reichstag, time loses meaning. The only thing that matters is the next room, the next staircase, the next corner. Every meter costs lives. Every floor costs more. By evening, Soviet troops control much of the lower levels. The Germans still hold sections of the upper floors. Neither side is willing to retreat. Neither side can easily advance. The battle has become a deadly maze. Inside one of the most famous buildings in Europe, and somewhere above, through smoke and broken stone, lies the roof, the place where one flag will soon become one of the most recognizable images of the entire Second World War. But before that flag can fly, many more men, on both sides, must first fight their way up the stairs. By now, the Reichstag barely feels like a building. It feels alive. Every hallway echoes with gunfire. Every staircase hides another ambush. Every room smells of smoke, dust, and burned explosives. The walls themselves seem to tremble with every artillery impact outside. It's impossible to believe this place was once built for speeches and ceremonies. Now, it's built for survival. Your squad pauses behind a marble column, not because the fighting has stopped, because everyone needs a moment to breathe. One soldier pulls a canteen from his pack. There's barely enough water for 2 mouthfuls. He passes it without taking the first drink himself. No one speaks. There's nothing left worth saying. Then comes another order. Upstairs. The upper floors are worse. Much worse. The lower levels at least offered wide hallways. Here, the passage is narrow. Broken beams block entire corridors. Collapsed ceilings force soldiers to crawl beneath piles of stone. Visibility drops to only a few meters. Sometimes, you hear the Germans before you see them. Sometimes, you don't. A burst of automatic fire erupts around the corner. The man walking in front of you falls backward into the rest of the squad. Everyone dives for cover. Bullets punch chunks from the walls. White marble explodes into clouds of sharp fragments. Those fragments become almost as dangerous as the bullets themselves. Tiny pieces of stone slice through faces and hands. Even the building is fighting you now. Someone throws a grenade. You flatten yourself against the wall. The explosion rattles your teeth. Dust fills the hallway so completely, you can't see your own rifle. When the smoke finally begins clearing, both sides rush forward simultaneously. The fight lasts only seconds. Afterward, the hallway is silent again, except for the sound of distant artillery, which never stops. Room by room, the Soviets continue climbing. Each floor captured costs dozens of lives. The defenders fall back, but never very far. Every staircase becomes another battle. Every landing becomes another fortress. It feels less like taking a building, and more like climbing a mountain that refuses to let anyone reach the summit. Outside, other Soviet divisions continue pushing deeper into central Berlin. The German defense is collapsing. Slowly, painfully, but collapsing nonetheless. Entire districts have fallen. Supply lines no longer exist. Communication breaks down. Many German commanders can no longer contact neighboring units. Each pocket fights almost entirely on its own. Some don't even realize they're surrounded. Deep beneath the city, inside the Führer bunker, the atmosphere has become almost surreal. Telephones ring constantly. Messengers rush through narrow corridors. Maps are updated every hour. Each update looks worse than the last. Yet Adolf Hitler continues issuing commands. He orders divisions to attack that no longer have enough men to fill a company. He demands counteroffensives from commanders who barely have ammunition left. Reality has become something happening outside the bunker walls. Inside, hope survives only because no one dares contradict him. Back inside the Reichstag, your platoon reaches another staircase. This one leads toward the roof. German defenders know exactly how important it is. Machine guns sweep every step. Anyone who climbs too quickly doesn't climb very far. The engineers move forward again. Explosives, smoke grenades, covering fire. The familiar rhythm repeats. Blast, advance, pause, repeat. Slowly, meter by meter, the Soviets force their way upward. Then, for the first time, daylight appears through a shattered opening above. The roof. It's close now. So close you can smell the fresh air mixing with smoke. The men around you seem to sense it. Fatigue disappears. Not because they're less exhausted, because they understand what reaching the roof means. Several Soviet soldiers have been carrying something wrapped tightly beneath their uniforms, carefully protected throughout the battle. Not food, not ammunition, a flag, one of several victory banners prepared before the assault even began. The commanders knew this moment would come. They just didn't know who would still be alive to witness it. The final climb is chaotic. Bullets ricochet from stone. German defenders continue firing from hidden positions. One banner. Carrier stumbles. Another grabs the flag before it touches the ground. No one wants history to remember the banner lying in the dust. Finally, the rooftop. Smoke blows across broken statues. Twisted metal hangs from shattered sections of the dome. The city stretches in every direction. Berlin is burning. Thousands of fires merge into one enormous orange glow beneath a gray sky. The battle still rages below, but from here, it almost seems distant. Several soldiers scramble across the damaged roof, searching for somewhere high enough. A bronze sculpture, a broken column, anything still standing. One man climbs higher despite bullets cracking overhead. Another steadies him. Hands shake from exhaustion and adrenaline. Then, the red banner is tied into place. For a brief second, nothing happens. The cloth hangs limp in the smoky air. Then a gust of wind catches it. The flag unfolds, bright red against the gray ruins of Berlin. The men nearby cheer. Some laugh. Some simply stare. Others remove their caps in silence. Not because the battle is over. It isn't. German defenders are still fighting inside the building. Shots still echo through the stairwells. Men are still dying. But everyone understands what this moment means. The capital of Nazi Germany has been marked. Symbolically, the war has reached its end. The famous photograph the world would later come to know would actually be recreated under more controlled conditions after the fighting and later retouched before publication. But the first banners raised during the battle were very real. They went up amid smoke, confusion, and relentless gunfire, not during a peaceful ceremony, but in the middle of one of the fiercest urban battles in history. As evening settles over Berlin, the flag continues fluttering above the ruined Reichstag. Below, the fighting refuses to stop, because capturing a symbol isn't the same thing as ending a war. And somewhere beneath the shattered streets, inside, a reinforced concrete bunker, one man still refuses to admit that everything is over. While Soviet soldiers fight through the shattered halls of the Reichstag, another battle is unfolding, nearly 30 feet below ground. No explosions shake these walls. No artillery crashes through the ceiling. Instead, there is fluorescent light, concrete, steel doors, the stale smell of recycled air. This is the Führer bunker, the final headquarters of Adolf Hitler. And despite everything happening above, the routine continues. Secretaries type reports. Officers answer telephones. Orderlies carry messages through narrow corridors. Meals are served at regular times. It almost feels normal if you ignore the fact that an entire empire is collapsing overhead. Hitler has lived underground for months now. The bunker was never designed to be comfortable. The ceilings are low. The rooms are cramped. The air is heavy with cigarette smoke and diesel fumes from the generators. There are no windows, no sunlight, no sense of day or night. Only clocks. Without them, you'd have no idea how much time had passed. Those who see Hitler now struggle to recognize him. He is only 56 years old. But he looks much older. His shoulders stoop noticeably. His left hand trembles almost constantly. Witnesses describe his skin as pale, almost gray. He walks slowly, sometimes dragging one foot. The man whose speeches once captivated enormous crowds now speaks quietly, often barely above a whisper. Years of war, stress, poor health, and isolation have transformed him. Yet one thing hasn't changed. His certainty. Even now, with Soviet artillery landing only a few hundred meters away, he refuses to believe defeat is inevitable. Maps still cover the conference table. Staff officers continue moving colored pins across Germany. Except, many of those units no longer exist. Some divisions have been destroyed completely. Others are little more than scattered survivors. The maps tell one story. Reality tells another. Several generals attempt to explain the situation. They speak carefully, very carefully. No one wants to be accused of defeatism. One officer quietly points out that the promised relief force cannot break through. Another reports that Soviet tanks have reached yet another district. Each report sounds worse than the last. Hitler listens, then dismisses them. He insists the counterattack will succeed. Orders are issued. Messages are transmitted. Officers salute. They leave the room knowing many of those orders can never be carried out. Outside the bunker, Berlin continues burning. Inside, time feels frozen. Meals are still announced. Tea is still served. The contrast is almost impossible to comprehend. A city dies above ground, while dinner proceeds below. On April 29th, Hitler makes one final personal decision. He marries Eva Braun. They have been together for years. Now, with Soviet soldiers only blocks away. They finally become husband and wife. The ceremony is brief, simple, almost surreal considering the circumstances. A civil official conducts the service. Witnesses sign the documents. Congratulations are exchanged. For a short while, people even smile. It may be the last smile many of them ever share. Afterward, Hitler dictates his political testament. He blames others for Germany's defeat. He appoints successors. He refuses to accept responsibility for the catastrophe surrounding him. Secretaries type every word. Copies are prepared. Messengers volunteer to carry them out of the city. Some succeed. Many do not. Meanwhile, above ground, you know nothing about any of this. You're sitting inside the ruined Reichstag, leaning against a cracked stone pillar. Your uniform is coated in white dust from shattered walls. Your hands are black with soot. Someone passes around a loaf of bread. Each man tears off a piece no larger than his palm. No one complains. After weeks of fighting, food has become fuel. Nothing more. One soldier asks quietly, "Do you think it's over?" Nobody answers immediately. Finally, an older sergeant shakes his head. Not yet. He's right. Gunfire still echoes through the building. German defenders continue resisting in isolated rooms and basements. Across Berlin, thousands of soldiers remain armed. The flag above the Reichstag is symbolic. But symbols don't stop bullets. Night falls once again. The city glows beneath countless fires. Columns of smoke drift across the rooftops. The red banner above the Reichstag is barely visible in the darkness. Yet somewhere beneath those burning streets, inside reinforced concrete walls, one final decision is about to be made. A decision that will echo across history. Because by tomorrow, the man who began this war will no longer be alive to see how it ends. And when that news finally spreads through Berlin, some soldiers will refuse to believe it. Others will refuse to surrender anyway. Because even after leaders disappear, wars have a habit of continuing. Just a little longer. April 30th. By now, the battle for Berlin has become less about armies and more about isolated pockets of resistance. Entire German units have been cut off from one another. Some are still fighting with remarkable determination. Others have no idea what's happening beyond the next street. Communication has almost completely collapsed. Every commander is making decisions based on fragments of information. Rumors spread faster than orders. Deep beneath the ruined city, inside the Führer bunker, the atmosphere is strangely calm. Not hopeful, not optimistic. Simply quiet. Those inside understand something the soldiers outside do not. The end has arrived. Hitler spends much of the morning saying goodbye. He shakes hands with officers, thanks members of his staff. Some cry openly. Others stand stiffly at attention. No one really knows what to say. How do you say goodbye to the man who ruled Germany for 12 years, when the country no longer exists in any meaningful sense? There is no handbook for moments like this. Shortly after lunch, Hitler and Eva Braun retreat into their private room. The door closes behind them. Outside, several staff members wait silently in the corridor. No one speaks. Even the artillery seems distant for a moment. Minutes pass. Then, a single gunshot. Nothing more. Just one sharp crack, echoing faintly through reinforced concrete. The waiting is over. The door is opened. Inside, Adolf Hitler is dead. Eva Braun lies beside him. She has taken poison. Hitler has done the same, while also shooting himself. The dictator who plunged Europe into 6 years of war dies inside a bunker, while his capital burns above him. Not on a battlefield, not leading a final charge. Hidden underground, far from the soldiers still dying in his name. His final instructions are carried out almost immediately. The bodies are wrapped in blankets, carried up the narrow bunker stairs, taken into the Reich Chancellery Garden. Outside, Soviet artillery continues landing nearby. Shells explode so close that those performing the task must work quickly. Petrol is poured over both bodies. Someone strikes a match. Flames rise. Several witnesses stand in silence. Some salute. Others simply stare. Within minutes, smoke drifts upward into the same sky already blackened by the destruction of Berlin. It's a surreal image. The leader of Nazi Germany, being cremated, while only a few hundred meters away. Soviet soldiers continue fighting house by house. History often ends more quietly than anyone expects. Word does not spread immediately. Inside the bunker, only a handful of people know the truth. Outside, German soldiers continue firing. Machine guns still chatter across intersections. Snipers still wait inside ruined buildings. No one on the front lines suddenly lays down their rifle. Because no one knows. You certainly don't. Your platoon is pushing through another government building. The fighting feels almost mechanical now. Check the doorway. Throw the grenade. Wait. Enter. Clear the room. Move to the next. You've repeated the sequence so many times. Your body performs it without conscious thought. Only afterward, when the shooting stops, do you realize how close death came. Again, in one office, you find maps scattered across the floor. Telephones still sit on polished desks. Coffee cups remain half full. The people who worked here disappeared only hours earlier. Everything else stayed behind. War has a habit of interrupting ordinary moments. Without warning, outside, a white flag appears in the window of a nearby apartment building. Then another, and another. Civilians are beginning to emerge from basements. Slowly, carefully. Some carry children. Others carry only blankets. Many simply raise empty hands. Their faces tell the story more clearly than words ever could. Weeks without proper food. Months without sunlight. Years without peace. The battle may not be over. But for many civilians, the will to continue disappeared long ago. Not every German soldier chooses the same path. Some surrender immediately. Others refuse. Small groups of SS troops continue resisting fiercely. They know exactly what Hitler's death would mean. Not just the end of Germany's hopes, but the end of their own future as well. Many decide they'll fight until the last bullet. Some do exactly that. Late that evening, rumors begin drifting through Soviet ranks. Someone claims Hitler is dead. Another insists it's only propaganda. Someone else says he escaped south. Another says he fled by airplane. Every soldier seems to hear a different version. No one knows which story to believe. In war, truth usually arrives last. Your sergeant shrugs when someone asks. It doesn't matter. He looks toward another street where gunfire has just erupted. As long as they're still shooting, our job isn't finished. He's right. Whether Hitler is alive or dead, the bullets coming toward you are equally real. Night settles over Berlin once more. The fires burn lower now. Not because the city is healing, because there is less left to burn. Somewhere beyond the smoke, church bells lie silent beneath collapsed towers. Streetlights no longer shine. Trams no longer run. The capital of Germany, one of Europe's greatest cities, has become a landscape of broken stone and ash. Tomorrow, more German commanders will learn the truth. Tomorrow, some will surrender. Others won't. Because ending a war on paper is much easier than ending it. Inside the hearts of the men still holding rifles, the first white flag appears, almost by accident. It's not hanging from a government building or a military headquarters. It's a bedsheet, tied to the handle of a broom, and carefully pushed through the broken window of a third-floor apartment. No speech, no ceremony, just a quiet signal. We're finished. For weeks, the people inside that building have lived beneath the streets. Children have learned to sleep through artillery. Parents have learned how to divide a single loaf of bread between 8 people. Old men have forgotten what silence sounds like. Now, they cautiously climb the stairs, blinking in daylight they haven't seen in days. Some haven't seen it in weeks. Your platoon notices them immediately. A woman steps outside first. She holds the hand of a little girl. The child can't be older than 6. Behind them, an elderly man emerges carrying a white towel above his head. No weapons, no sudden movements, just fear, pure fear. The lieutenant raises one hand. Let them pass. No one argues. The civilians shuffle across the street, carefully stepping around broken glass, shell craters, and abandoned rifles. The little girl stops beside a destroyed tank. She stares at it for several seconds, then quietly asks her mother something. You can't hear the words. The mother simply pulls her along. Some questions don't have answers worth giving. Not every street looks like this. A few blocks away, another German machine gun opens fire. The crackling echoes between buildings. Within seconds, everyone dives for cover. The civilians disappear back into the nearest cellar. The illusion that the battle is ending vanishes instantly. That's what makes urban warfare so cruel. One street can be completely silent. The next, become a battlefield. Throughout Berlin, German commanders face impossible choices. Some recognize the situation for what it is. Hopeless. They gather their remaining soldiers, destroy documents, unload their pistols, raise white flags. Others refuse, especially many SS units. To them, surrender is unthinkable. Some still believe relief forces are coming. Others simply decide they'd rather die where they stand. The result is chaos. One building surrenders peacefully. The building next door keeps fighting. Your unit enters another apartment block. No shots, no resistance, just silence. The hallway smells of damp concrete. Someone has left a kettle on a stove. The fire underneath went out long ago. A family photograph still hangs crookedly on the wall. You stop for a moment. A smiling couple. 3 children. Summer clothes. A picnic. It could have been taken anywhere. At any time. The people in the picture look like they belong to a different world. One untouched by war. You wonder if any of them are still alive. Then you place the frame back exactly where you found it and move on. Outside, columns of German prisoners begin appearing. At first, just a few, then dozens, then hundreds. Many look relieved, exhausted beyond words. Some still carry their helmets. Others have discarded everything except the clothes they're wearing. One young German soldier keeps glancing over his shoulder, as though he still expects someone to order him back into the fight. No one does. You notice something surprising. Many prisoners aren't much older than you. Some are younger. They look frightened, hungry, cold. Not like the terrifying enemy described in propaganda. Just tired men who survived long enough to stop fighting. War has a strange way of shrinking everyone into the same shape. Hungry, dirty, exhausted, human. Across the city, Soviet medical teams begin establishing aid stations. Not just for their own wounded, for civilians too. Doctors work without stopping. Gunshot wounds, burns, collapsed lungs, broken bones, malnutrition. There are far more patients than medicine. The doctors don't choose who deserves help. They simply help whoever reaches them first. Meanwhile, the rumors continue spreading. Hitler is dead. No, he escaped. The war ends tonight. No, the SS will fight forever. Every hour brings another story. Every story sounds convincing. Every story contradicts the last. Eventually, most soldiers stop listening altogether. Only one fact matters. The shooting hasn't stopped. Late that afternoon, your platoon pauses beside a canal. The water is black with soot. Bits of broken timber drift slowly downstream. A helmet floats past. No one reaches for it. One of the older soldiers quietly sits on the curb. He removes his boots. For the first time in days, his socks are soaked through. His feet are covered in blisters. He stares at them for a long time, then begins laughing. Softly, almost to himself. You ask what's funny. He smiles without looking up. I forgot, he says, what my feet looked like. Several others laugh too. Not because it's especially amusing, because after weeks of constant fighting, sometimes the smallest reminder of ordinary life feels almost miraculous. As evening approaches, the artillery becomes less frequent. Not silent, just farther away. The center of resistance continues shrinking. The battle is no longer spread across Berlin. It's concentrated into isolated pockets, government buildings, railway stations, a few stubborn intersections. Each hour, another one falls. You climb onto the roof of a damaged apartment building. The view stretches across the ruined capital. Smoke still hangs over the skyline. The Reichstag's red flag is visible in the distance, fluttering above shattered stone. For weeks, that flag was the objective. Now, it's simply another landmark in a city that no longer resembles itself. The battle is ending. You can feel it, not because someone announces it, because the city itself seems too exhausted to keep fighting. But tomorrow, you'll learn something every soldier eventually discovers. The final shots of a war are almost never fired. On the day everyone thinks it's over. The strange thing about the end of a battle is that it rarely sounds like the end. You might expect silence. Instead, Berlin still echoes with gunfire. Not everywhere, just enough places to keep everyone nervous. A burst of automatic fire from a railway station. A sniper somewhere inside a church tower. A grenade exploding inside a government office. The city refuses to stop fighting, all at once. Instead, it dies slowly, street by street, building by building. Your platoon moves cautiously through another neighborhood. The pace has changed. No longer rushing. No longer assaulting every block. Now, you're searching, listening, waiting. Because the remaining defenders aren't trying to hold Berlin anymore. They're simply trying to survive. Some hope to break west. Toward the Americans, others refuse to surrender out of fear. And some simply don't know the war is already slipping away. Every doorway feels uncertain. One apartment building may contain frightened civilians. The next, a squad of armed soldiers. You never know until the door opens. Sometimes, not even then. The engineers knock first, not politely, with the butt of a rifle. Then comes the command. Surrender. Sometimes, nothing happens. Other times, the door opens slowly. Hands appear first, then faces. Old women, children, exhausted men wearing civilian clothes. Eyes wide with fear. Relief washes over everyone. Another building secured, without bloodshed, but not always. One cellar answers with gunfire. The first burst strikes the wall beside the entrance. Brick dust fills the air. Everyone dives behind cover. A grenade rolls through the doorway. Seconds later, the explosion shakes the entire building. Silence. Your squad enters carefully. Inside, 3 German soldiers remain. 1 officer. 2 teenagers. Their rifles lie scattered across the floor. The battle lasted less than a minute, yet it ended 3 lives. After weeks of fighting, you've stopped counting moments like these. That realization troubles you far more than the gunfire ever did. Across Berlin, thousands of civilians are beginning to emerge. Some carry white cloths. Others carry nothing at all. Many simply stand outside their ruined homes, looking around in disbelief. It's as though they're seeing their own city for the very first time. Entire streets have vanished. Buildings they've walked past for decades are gone. Churches reduced to rubble. Schools burned hollow. Parks transformed into crater fields. Nothing feels familiar anymore. One elderly woman kneels beside what used to be her apartment. She begins brushing dust away with her bare hands. Slowly, patiently. She isn't digging for valuables. She's looking for photographs, family albums, anything proving her life existed before the war. One Soviet soldier quietly kneels beside her. Without speaking, he starts helping. Neither understands the other's language. They don't need to. Some things require no translation. Meanwhile, German prisoners continue marching east in long columns. Thousands of them. Some wounded. Some barefoot. Some barely able to stay upright. You notice something unexpected. Many Soviet soldiers no longer glare at them. They barely look at them. Hatred requires energy. For years of unimaginable fighting, most men have none left. Only exhaustion remains. Near midday, your company receives fresh orders. Another government complex. Reports suggest several hundred defenders remain inside. No one complains. No one celebrates. It's simply the next task. One more building. One more fight. That's how wars end. Not with dramatic finales, but with another assignment. The attack lasts nearly 3 hours. Room after room. Floor after floor. The defenders resist fiercely at first. Then, something changes. A white cloth appears from an upper window. Machine guns fall silent. One by one, German soldiers emerge. Some still carrying helmets. Others supporting wounded comrades. They look relieved, almost grateful, as though surrender itself has become a kind of freedom. Your commander orders everyone to lower their weapons. The prisoners are searched, then escorted away. No shouting, no cheering, no celebration. Just another pocket of resistance. Gone. As evening falls, the artillery grows quieter than you've ever heard it. Not completely silent, just distant. For the first time in weeks, you can hear birds. Only a few. Somehow they've survived everything. Their songs drift across broken rooftops, as though they don't understand that history has just changed forever. You find yourself sitting on the steps of a ruined courthouse. Someone hands you a mug of hot tea. It's weak, barely warm, possibly the best thing you've tasted in months. Across the street, another soldier pulls a harmonica from his pocket. The melody is slow, gentle, almost hesitant. Men stop walking. No one speaks. For 2 minutes, the ruined capital of the Third Reich listens to music instead of gunfire. The moment ends when another burst of rifle fire echoes somewhere in the distance. Everyone instinctively reaches for their weapons. Old habits. The harmonica disappears. The tea is set aside. The war isn't finished. Not quite. But everyone can feel it now. The end is no longer somewhere ahead. It's close enough that you can almost touch it. And tomorrow, the city that refused to surrender will finally fall. May 2nd. The morning feels different. Not peaceful. Just quieter. After weeks of constant explosions, your ears almost don't know how to process the silence. The artillery hasn't stopped completely, but it's no longer shaking the ground every few seconds. For the first time, you hear something else. Wind. Smoke still hangs above Berlin. The city remains wrapped in a gray blanket of dust and ash. But the giant pillars of black smoke that dominated the skyline yesterday are beginning to thin. Many of the fires have burned themselves out. There's simply less left to consume. Your company receives orders before sunrise. Advance cautiously. Expect isolated resistance. Secure remaining government buildings. The instructions sound familiar. Routine. But everyone senses this is different. The battle isn't ending because one side has won another street. It's ending because the city itself has nothing left to give. As you move forward, something unusual happens. German soldiers begin approaching openly. No ambush. No hidden weapons. Just men walking slowly with white cloth tied to rifles. Some have removed their helmets. Others carry wounded comrades between them. One officer steps forward, raises both hands, and quietly says a single word. Capitulieren. Surrender. Within minutes, more groups appear. 10 men, then 20, then 50. It feels almost unbelievable. The same streets that demanded blood yesterday now fill with prisoners instead of bullets. The news spreads quickly. General Helmuth Weidling, the commander responsible for Berlin's defense, has surrendered the city. His remaining forces have been ordered to stop fighting. Not everyone hears the message immediately. Not everyone obeys. But the order has been given. Officially, Berlin has fallen. You don't cheer. Neither does anyone around you. The announcement feels strangely ordinary, almost quiet. After risking your life every hour, the end arrives as nothing more than another message passed from officer to officer. No trumpet, no celebration, just words. The city surrendered. Some soldiers simply sit down where they're standing. One man removes his helmet and stares at it. Another finally lights the cigarette he's been saving for weeks. Someone laughs. Another begins crying. No one mocks him. Several others wipe their own eyes. Not because they're weak, because they're exhausted. Sometimes, those two things look exactly the same. Across Berlin, cellar doors begin opening. Hundreds, then thousands. Families emerge into daylight. Many pause in silence. They barely recognize their own neighborhoods. Entire apartment blocks have disappeared. Church towers lie broken across streets. Street signs point toward buildings that no longer exist. The city has survived, but only just. A small boy walks cautiously across a square carrying a wooden toy truck. Its wheels are missing. He kneels beside a crater, pretending it's a road. For a few moments, he simply plays. Children have an extraordinary ability to reclaim ordinary life, even surrounded by ruins. Nearby, a Soviet medic kneels beside a wounded German soldier. The medic doesn't ask who he fought for. He doesn't ask where he came from. He simply unwraps fresh bandages, cleans the wound, and begins working. War spends years dividing people. Sometimes, peace begins with one person refusing to care which uniform another man wore yesterday. The scale of destruction becomes impossible to ignore. More than a third of Berlin's buildings have been destroyed or heavily damaged. Entire districts resemble fields of broken stone. Bridges lie collapsed into rivers. Railway stations are little more than twisted steel. Electric cables hang across empty streets. The capital of one of Europe's most powerful nations has become a city of ruins. You begin walking without orders, simply observing. A grand opera house with no roof. A library whose books now drift through puddles like fallen leaves. A bakery reduced to one standing wall. Inside, loaves of bread sit blackened inside ovens that will never be opened again. Everywhere, ordinary life ended in the middle of an ordinary day. Then, you notice writing on a wall. Not propaganda, not military orders, just a sentence written in chalk. Please tell us if the war is over. No signature, no date, just hope, written by someone hiding underground, waiting for permission to believe. By afternoon, columns of prisoners stretch farther than you can see. German officers, Volkssturm, Hitler Youth, SS, Army, sailors, police, different uniforms, same destination. Many look relieved. Some still appear stunned. A few continue staring straight ahead, unable to accept what has happened. You think back to the first day of the offensive, the Silo Heights, the endless artillery, the burning tanks, the friends who never crossed the river, the soldiers buried beside roads without names. The weeks blur together until they almost feel unreal. You survived. Many better men didn't. That thought will stay with you, long after the war is over. As evening approaches, you climb the upper floor of a shattered apartment building. The sun finally breaks through the smoke. Only briefly, golden light falls across the ruins of Berlin. For the first time, the city is quiet enough that you can hear church bells, not because someone is ringing them, because the wind is gently moving the broken metal inside collapsed towers. A strange, melancholy music, the soundtrack to the end of a war. The Battle of Berlin is over, but the Second World War is not. Far from Berlin, millions of soldiers are still fighting. In Czechoslovakia, in northern Germany, across the Atlantic, and thousands of miles away, another empire continues. The war in the Pacific. For Europe, the nightmare is almost finished. For the rest of the world, there are still chapters left to write. And for the men who survived Berlin, the hardest battle may only just be beginning. Because some wars end on the battlefield, the others continue quietly, inside the minds of the people who lived through them. For the first time in weeks, you wake up without the sound of artillery. You don't trust it. In fact, the silence feels more unsettling than the explosions ever did. For several seconds, you lie perfectly still, waiting, listening. Surely another barrage is coming. Surely another officer will burst through the doorway shouting for everyone to move. Nothing happens. Only the distant call of a bird, the creaking of damaged buildings, and the wind, moving through a city that no longer has the strength to fight. It takes a while before your body accepts the truth. The battle is over. Your rifle is still beside you. Your boots are still caked in dried mud. Your uniform still smells of smoke. But for the first morning in months, you aren't expected to charge another machine gun position. You're simply alive. Outside, Berlin is slowly waking. Not as a capital, not as the center of the Third Reich, just as a city trying to remember how to exist. Civilians move cautiously through the streets. Some carry buckets. Others push wheelbarrows filled with bricks. A few sweep broken glass from doorways that no longer have doors. No one has been told exactly what comes next. They simply begin rebuilding, one stone at a time. The Soviet soldiers wander quietly through the ruins. Some search abandoned buildings. Others write letters home. Many simply sit, after weeks of living every minute expecting death. Doing absolutely nothing feels strangely exhausting. One veteran quietly says, "I forgot what boredom felt like." The others smile. It's the first genuine smile you've seen in a long time. Then, word begins spreading. Germany is negotiating a complete surrender. Not just Berlin, all of Germany. The officers caution everyone not to celebrate yet. The fighting hasn't ended everywhere. Some German formations continue resisting farther west. Others haven't even received the news. But everyone understands. History is moving quickly now. A photographer appears near the Reichstag. He's carrying heavy equipment through piles of rubble. Around him, Soviet soldiers gather. Some climb onto destroyed tanks. Others stand beside shattered statues. The photographer asks several men to reposition themselves. Move slightly left. Raise the banner higher. Look toward the skyline. The famous photograph that millions will one day recognize takes shape in front of the camera. A carefully composed image, capturing a victory earned through weeks of terrifying chaos. What the photograph cannot capture is the smell, or the exhaustion, or the fear. Pictures rarely show the things people remember most. Elsewhere in Berlin, military doctors continue working around the clock. The wounded still arrive constantly. Many injuries aren't from new fighting. They're from people finally emerging from collapsed buildings. Workers uncover survivors trapped beneath rubble. Some have survived for days. Others weren't as fortunate. The war continues claiming lives. Even after the shooting slows, you find yourself walking through a residential neighborhood. The destruction here feels somehow more personal. Children's toys lie scattered across cracked sidewalks. Laundry still hangs from lines stretched between broken balconies. A piano sits exposed inside a collapsed apartment. Rain has begun collecting on its keys. You gently press one. A single note echoes across the empty street, then fades away. An elderly German man watches from nearby. He doesn't look angry. He doesn't look afraid. Just tired. He notices the piano, then quietly says something in German. You don't understand the words, but somehow, you understand exactly what he means. Everything beautiful has been interrupted. That afternoon, your company gathers in what used to be a public square. The commanding officer climbs onto the remains of a fountain. He removes his cap, looks across the exhausted faces in front of him, then says something remarkably simple. You've done your duty. No grand speech. No dramatic promises. Just those 4 words. For many men, they mean more than any medal ever could. That evening, someone produces an accordion. No one knows where it came from. A slow melody fills the square. Soldiers who survived Stalingrad, Kursk, the Dnieper, Warsaw, and finally Berlin sit together in silence. Some hum along. Some stare into the distance. Some think about home. Many think about the friends who should have been sitting beside them. Victory always has empty chairs. As darkness settles over Berlin, the fires continue burning in scattered places. But the sky is different now, no longer flashing constantly with artillery. For the first time in years, stars begin appearing above the city. Only a handful, then more. One soldier notices them and quietly says, "I forgot they were still there." No one laughs, because almost everyone had forgotten. Within a week, on May 8th, 1945. Germany would officially surrender to the Allied powers. Across Europe, church bells would ring. Crowds would flood city streets. Strangers would embrace. For millions, the Second World War in Europe would finally be over. But for the soldiers who stood inside Berlin, the celebration would always be quieter, because they knew exactly what victory had cost. Not in speeches, not in headlines, but in names, faces, letters never delivered, and voices they would continue hearing, long after the guns had fallen silent. Wars often end with signatures on paper. History remembers those. Soldiers remember something else. The final sunrise, the first quiet morning, the friend who wasn't there to see it, and the overwhelming realization that somehow, against every expectation, they survived. People imagine that the moment a war ends, everyone immediately goes home. The reality is very different. For you, the war seems to end, and not end, at exactly the same time. Your rifle is still slung across your shoulder. Your ammunition pouch is still full. You still stand guard through the night. You still wake at the slightest unexpected sound. Officially, the fighting has stopped. Your body doesn't believe it yet. The days after Berlin fall into an unfamiliar routine. Instead of clearing buildings, you guard intersections. Instead of assaulting bunkers, you direct columns of prisoners. Instead of dodging bullets, you wait. And waiting turns out to be far harder than anyone expected. For years, every morning brought a clear purpose. Advance. Hold the line. Survive. Now, there are hours with absolutely nothing to do. The silence leaves room for something that never had a chance before. Thoughts. Too many of them. You begin remembering faces. Not the famous generals. Not the politicians. The ordinary soldiers. The farm boy who shared his last cigarette outside Warsaw. The mechanic from Minsk who could repair almost anything with a hammer and a length of wire. The quiet schoolteacher who carried photographs of his wife inside his helmet. One by one, they return, not as ghosts, as memories. Some still smile. Others never grow older. One afternoon, your unit receives mail. Some letters are weeks old. Others, months. The postal system has spent the war chasing moving front lines. Now, it's finally catching up. You recognize your wife's handwriting immediately. Your hand shakes slightly as you open the envelope. Inside, she writes about ordinary things. The vegetable garden, the neighbor's new horse, the weather. For anyone else, the letter would seem almost boring. To you, it's the most beautiful thing you've ever read. Because every ordinary sentence reminds you that ordinary life still exists. A friend sitting beside you notices you're smiling. What is it? You hand him the letter. He doesn't read it. He simply nods. I hope mine comes tomorrow. It doesn't. Not everyone receives good news. Some letters tell soldiers that parents have died, that homes have been destroyed, that wives have disappeared during the occupation. Victory doesn't erase years of loss. It only stops adding new ones. Throughout Berlin, the cleanup begins immediately. Engineers clear roads. Doctors vaccinate civilians. Water pipes are repaired. Temporary bridges replace collapsed ones. The city begins stitching itself back together. Slowly, painfully, almost reluctantly, children adapt the fastest. Within days, they've invented games among the ruins. Broken helmets become toys. Brick piles become castles. Crater fields become playgrounds. Adults watch them, half horrified, half amazed. Children possess an extraordinary gift. They rebuild hope, without realizing they're doing it. One morning, you pass a classroom whose roof has collapsed. A teacher stands outside with a dozen children. There are no desks, no blackboard, no proper walls. She simply gathers everyone together, opens a single surviving book, and begins teaching. History, math, reading. It doesn't matter. The lesson itself isn't important. The act of teaching is. It's proof that tomorrow still exists. Weeks pass. Eventually, your commanding officer gathers the company together. This time, his words are different. You'll be rotating home. No cheering, Just stunned silence. Home. The word almost sounds unfamiliar. You've repeated it in letters for years. Now, it's becoming real. The train station is crowded. Not with civilians. With soldiers. Thousands of them. Each carrying the same worn backpack. The same tired expression. Some lean against walls asleep before the train even arrives. Others simply stare down the tracks. Nobody seems impatient. After surviving 4 years of war, waiting another few hours hardly matters. When the train finally begins moving east, Berlin slowly disappears behind you. At first, you watch through the window. The ruined factories, collapsed bridges, rows of shattered apartments. Then, the city fades into the distance. You wonder if you'll ever see it again. Part of you hopes not. The journey home feels strangely quiet. No one talks much. Some men sleep almost the entire trip. Others write letters. One soldier carefully removes mud from his boots. He's been trying for nearly an hour. The stains refuse to disappear. Eventually, he laughs. I suppose they'll always be there. No one tells him. He isn't talking about the boots. As the countryside rolls past, you notice something remarkable. Fields. Green fields. Untouched by shell fire. Trees still standing. Farmhouses with smoke rising peacefully from their chimneys. For months, your world has been gray. Smoke. Concrete. Ash. Now, there's color again. You almost forgot the world had colors. You close your eyes. Not because you're tired. Because for the first time in years, there's nothing left to watch for. No artillery. No snipers. No orders. Just the steady rhythm of train wheels carrying you farther from war. And closer to whatever life waits beyond it. But even as the distance grows, you already understand something few civilians ever will. You can leave a battlefield. A battlefield doesn't always leave you. The train finally stops. No fanfare. No military band. Just the squeal of steel wheels. And the quiet hiss of steam. For years, you imagined this moment. You pictured yourself running off the platform. Smiling. Laughing. Throwing your arms around the people waiting for you. Instead, you just sit there, staring out the window, almost afraid to move. Because part of you still believes. Someone will shout. Everybody back on board. War teaches you that good news rarely lasts. Eventually, you stand, lift your pack, and step onto the platform. The air smells different. Clean. Fresh. No smoke. No burning brick. No cordite. Just rain. And spring grass. You inhale deeply. It's the first full breath you've taken in years. Families crowd the station. Children wave handmade flags. Women search every face that steps off the train. Some reunions happen instantly. A wife screams her husband's name. A father lifts his son into the air. Brothers embrace so tightly, neither can speak. Others wait and wait until the platform empties. Some of the people they came for aren't getting off this train, or any train. You spot her, standing near the end of the platform. She's older, not by much, but enough. The years have left their mark on both of you. For a second, neither of you moves. You simply stare, almost trying to convince yourselves the other is real. Then, she starts walking. So do you. When you finally reach each other, there aren't any dramatic speeches. No perfectly chosen words. She wraps her arms around you. You hold on, perhaps a little too tightly. Neither of you notices or cares. For the first time in years, you're not saying goodbye. The walk home feels almost unreal. The roads are familiar. The trees are familiar. The houses are familiar. Everything is exactly where you left it. And yet, nothing feels familiar anymore. Not because the village changed. Because you did. That night, you sleep in a real bed. A mattress. Clean sheets. A roof that isn't collapsing. No artillery. No machine guns. No officers waking you before dawn. You should sleep better than ever before. Instead, you wake 3 times. The first time, because a door slams somewhere outside. Your body reacts before your mind. You're already reaching for a rifle. That isn't there. The second time, it's thunder. For one terrifying second, Your bedroom becomes Berlin again. Then the sound fades. Rain begins falling against the window. You're home. Your heartbeat takes much longer to believe it. The third time, there isn't any sound at all. You simply wake. Wide awake. Listening. The silence feels unnatural. Almost dangerous. You never realized how accustomed you'd become to sleeping beside explosions. Morning arrives. You'll describe the buildings, the fighting, the flag above the Reichstag. But there will always be parts you leave out. Not because you want to forget, because some memories don't fit into words. The Battle of Berlin officially lasted just over 2 weeks. But for many who fought there, it never truly ended. It followed them home, in quiet moments, unexpected sounds, and dreams that returned without invitation. History records battles by dates. Human beings remember them differently. One heartbeat, one memory, and one silent night at a time. Years pass, then decades. The uniforms disappear. The medals are packed into drawers. The newspapers yellow with age. Children grow up. Cities are rebuilt. The world moves on. At least, it appears to. Berlin changes faster than almost anyone imagined. The mountains of rubble slowly disappear. Brick by brick, street by street, women become known as the Trümmerfrauen, the rubble women. While many men are still prisoners of war, or simply never return, thousands of women begin clearing the city by hand. No heavy machinery, just shovels, wheelbarrows, and determination. They stack reusable bricks into neat piles. Sweep streets that no longer have names. Build a future from the ruins of the past. The scars remain. Some buildings are repaired. Others disappear forever. New apartments rise where entire neighborhoods once burned. Trees are planted. Streetcars return. Children once again walk to school along roads where tanks once fought. Life has an extraordinary habit of returning, even to places that seem beyond saving. But memory works differently. One afternoon, many years later, you find yourself looking through an old wooden box. Inside, there's the letter your wife wrote while you were still fighting, the photograph you carried through Berlin, a faded railway ticket from the journey home, a rusted button that somehow survived everything, objects that would mean almost nothing to anyone else. To you, they contain entire worlds. Your grandson notices the box. He asks, "Were you really in the war?" You nod. He waits. Children expect stories, heroes, adventure. Instead, you struggle to answer. Because the truth doesn't sound heroic. The truth sounds cold, hungry, frightened, exhausted. Eventually, you tell him about the little girl you saw crossing the street with her mother. The old woman searching through rubble for family photographs. The soldier who laughed because he'd forgotten what his own feet looked like. Not the biggest battle. Not the greatest victory. Just people. Because in the end, that's what you remember most. Historians continued debating numbers. How many soldiers fought? How many shells were fired? How many buildings collapsed? How many civilians died? The exact figures still change. But one fact never does. The Battle of Berlin became one of the bloodiest urban battles in human history. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers fought street by street. Tens of thousands of civilians were caught in the middle. A city of millions became the final battlefield of a dying empire. Today, if you walk through Berlin, you'll find cafes where bunkers once stood. Cyclists ride along roads once blocked by barricades. Tourists gather beneath the restored Reichstag, taking photographs. Most hear only traffic, laughter, church bells. It's difficult to imagine that every one of those streets once echoed with artillery. Some traces remain. Small brass plaques embedded in sidewalks. Fragments of damaged walls. Old photographs displayed in museums. They're quiet reminders, not celebrations. Warnings. History preserved. So it doesn't have to be repeated. Sometimes, people ask whether the suffering was worth it, whether victory justified the cost. Those questions have no simple answers. Wars rarely do. The defeat of Nazi Germany ended one of history's darkest regimes. It also left millions of graves stretching across Europe. Both truths exist at exactly the same time. Ignoring either one means misunderstanding history. As evening falls, you step outside your home. The sky is clear. Children laugh somewhere down the road. A train passes in the distance. For a moment, the sound reminds you of another train, the one that carried you away from Berlin, away from war. You close your eyes, not because the memories hurt, because you want to remember them correctly. The friends, the civilians, the silence after the guns finally stopped. History often tells us when wars begin. It carefully records when they end. But for the people who lived through them, the ending isn't found in a treaty, or a signature, or a headline. It's found in ordinary moments. The first peaceful night's sleep, the first meal shared with family, the first spring morning, when birds finally sounded louder. Then artillery, and perhaps that's the greatest victory of all. Not that one side defeated another, but that one day, ordinary life, was finally allowed to begin again. History loves big moments. The raising of a flag, the signing of a surrender, the speeches, the parades, the photographs. Those become the pages in textbooks, the scenes in documentaries, the moments everyone remembers. But that's not how wars truly end. Not for the people who fought them. For soldiers, wars usually end very quietly. One morning, weeks after Berlin has fallen, you wake before sunrise. Old habit. For a few seconds, you lie perfectly still, listening. No artillery, no engines, no shouted commands. Only birds. Again, they're becoming familiar now. You smile, almost without realizing it. You decide to walk before breakfast. The fields are covered in dew. The air feels cool against your face. You pass a farmer repairing a fence, a woman hanging laundry, two boys chasing each other with sticks, pretending they're airplanes. You stop for a moment, watching them. The older boy dramatically crashes into the grass. The younger one laughs so hard, he falls over too. You wonder if either of them truly understands how lucky they are. Back during the war, you dreamed constantly about moments like this. Not glory, not medals, just peace. The ability to hear children laughing, without wondering whether artillery would interrupt them. Life slowly becomes predictable, and predictability turns out to be the greatest luxury you've ever known. Breakfast, work, dinner, sleep. The same routine, day after day. Once, that would have sounded boring. Now, it feels priceless. Sometimes, people recognize the ribbon on your jacket. They thank you for your service. Some shake your hand. Others ask questions. You always thank them politely. But inside, you think about someone else. The friend who never came home. The medic who died carrying another wounded soldier. The radio operator who spent 4 years transmitting messages, only to be killed less than a week before Berlin fell. You accept the gratitude, but part of you always feels it belongs to someone else. One afternoon, you visit the local cemetery. Fresh graves fill an entire section. Some belong to men whose bodies finally made it home. Others contain nothing at all, only names. Families needed somewhere to mourn. Even when there was nothing left to bury, you remove your cap, stand quietly, and read every name. Some are strangers, some aren't. Years continue passing. The world changes rapidly. New governments, new borders, new generations. The children born after the war ask questions their parents never dared ask. Schools begin teaching about Berlin, about Hitler, about the Reichstag, about the surrender. The battle slowly transforms from living memory into history. Then one day, you visit Berlin again, not as a soldier, as an old man. The train station is modern, busy, full of conversations in dozens of languages. People hurry past carrying shopping bags instead of rifles. Young couples sit in cafes. Cyclists weave through traffic. Office workers complain about being late. You smile. They're worried about ordinary problems. Exactly the kind of problems people should have. You walk toward the Reichstag. It's been restored. Its walls repaired. Its halls rebuilt. Visitors line up outside. Many pose for photographs. Some laugh. Some barely glance at the building before continuing their holiday. And that's perfectly fine, because they have the freedom to see it as just another landmark, not a battlefield. You place one hand gently against the stone. Some of it is new. Some of it isn't. Beneath your fingertips, you can still feel small scars left by bullets fired decades earlier. Most people walk past without noticing them. You don't. You never will. A young tourist standing nearby notices you staring. He asks politely, "Is this your first time here?" You smile softly, then shake your head. No. He waits, perhaps expecting an interesting travel story. Instead, you simply say, "I came here a very long time ago." He nods, smiles, and walks away. He never learns what you meant. You never tell him. Some stories don't need to be spoken. As the sun begins setting, the glass dome above the Reichstag reflects golden light across the city. The same city that once burned for weeks now glows peacefully beneath the evening sky. Trams pass quietly. People cross bridges rebuilt long ago. Children play in nearby parks. The sound of laughter echoes where machine guns once did. History hasn't disappeared. It has simply made room for life. You take one last look at the building, then quietly turn and begin walking away, because you've learned something after all these years. Victory isn't the moment a flag is raised. It isn't the surrender. It isn't the parade. Victory is a child growing up without ever hearing artillery, a family eating dinner without fear, a city rebuilt, a generation that only knows war through books. And if that generation can walk these streets without imagining what happened here, then perhaps all those who never came home didn't sacrifice everything for nothing. When people talk about Berlin, they often remember the ending, the flag, the surrender, Hitler's bunker, victory. But endings can sometimes hide the true cost of getting there. Between April 16th and May 2nd, 1945, hundreds of thousands of Soviet soldiers fought their way from the Oder River to the very center of Berlin. The offensive lasted just over 2 weeks. For the men who lived through it, it felt like an entire lifetime. The exact casualty figures remain debated by historians, but the scale is beyond comprehension. The Soviet army suffered hundreds of thousands of casualties during the Berlin offensive, including tens of thousands killed. German military losses were similarly catastrophic, with many killed, wounded, or captured during the final collapse of the Third Reich. And then there were the civilians, families trapped between two armies, people who had no battlefield to escape from. Many lost their homes. Many lost loved ones. Many lost everything except the clothes they were wearing. When historians count the dead, they're counting people, not numbers. Every destroyed building once belonged to someone. Every crater had an address. Every burned apartment once held birthday celebrations, family dinners, arguments, weddings, and ordinary mornings. War doesn't just destroy armies. It interrupts lives. Years later, construction workers rebuilding Berlin occasionally uncovered forgotten reminders beneath the streets. A helmet, a rusted rifle, a child's shoe, letters sealed inside metal boxes. Sometimes, human remains. The city never truly forgot. It simply buried its memories beneath new buildings. For the soldiers, the memories surfaced differently. A loud bang, a burning smell, a particular song, an ordinary staircase. Anything could suddenly transport them back to April 1945, back to smoke, back to rubble, back to Berlin. Long before anyone understood what trauma truly meant, millions were already living with it. Silently, what those streets looked like in the spring of 1945. And maybe that's exactly the point. Peace should eventually feel ordinary. If you've stayed with this story from the beginning, from the frozen Oder River, to the burning Reichstag, to the quiet streets that followed, then you've traveled through one of history's most consequential battles. Not through the eyes of generals or politicians, but through the experience of ordinary people. The men who carried rifles, The women who searched through rubble. The children who waited in dark cellars. The families who rebuilt everything afterward. Because in the end, history isn't really made by famous names. It's made by millions of ordinary people, forced to live through extraordinary times. And perhaps the greatest lesson Berlin leaves us isn't how wars are won. It's why they should never have to be fought. Again, if you ask 10 historians why Berlin mattered so much, you'll probably receive 10 different answers. Some will talk about strategy, others, politics. Some will point to symbolism, others, to geography. The truth is, they're all right. Because Berlin wasn't just another city. It was the heart of Nazi Germany. By the spring of 1945, Germany had already lost the war militarily. Its factories were collapsing. Its fuel supplies were nearly exhausted. Its air force had been reduced to a shadow of what it once was. Its armies were retreating on every front. So why keep fighting? Why sacrifice so many lives for a city that couldn't realistically be saved? Part of the answer was Adolf Hitler himself. To him, Berlin wasn't simply a capital. It represented everything. If Berlin fell, the Third Reich fell with it. He believed surrender would betray everything Germany had fought for. His generals increasingly disagreed. Many knew the war was unwinnable. But inside a dictatorship, knowing the truth and speaking the truth are two very different things. For Stalin, Berlin meant something entirely different. It wasn't only about defeating Germany. It was about ending the war. On Soviet terms, the Soviet Union had paid an unimaginable price. Entire cities destroyed, millions of civilians killed, entire generations of young men lost. The road from Moscow home. Life continues changing. Factories reopen. Schools fill again. Markets become busy. The world begins talking about rebuilding Europe. New borders, new governments, new alliances. A future that seemed impossible only months earlier slowly becomes reality. You sometimes wonder whether people born after the war will truly understand what happened. You hope they won't. Not because history should be forgotten, because no generation should ever have to understand war the way yours did. Reading about Berlin is one thing. Walking through it while it burned is another entirely. One evening, years later, someone untouched left exactly where they were found, not because no one could repair them, because someone decided they shouldn't. Some wounds deserve to remain visible. Near the Reichstag, tourists line up with cameras. Many admire the building's great glass dome. It's beautiful, bright, transparent. That transparency wasn't chosen by accident. After the Second World War, Germany deliberately rebuilt its parliament with glass overlooking the debating chamber below. The symbolism was unmistakable. Government should never again hide behind closed walls. The architecture itself became a lesson. Elsewhere in the city, small brass plaques glimmer beneath your feet. They're easy to miss. Each one bears a name, a date, an address. These are Stolperstein, stumbling stones. They mark the last freely chosen homes of victims persecuted by the Nazi regime. There are thousands of them across Europe. You don't literally stumble over them. You stumble with your thoughts. For just a moment, an ordinary sidewalk becomes personal. History stops being abstract. It becomes someone's front door. Museums preserve uniforms, helmets, letters. Children press their faces against glass cases. Parents quietly read the descriptions. Some visitors stay only minutes. Others stand silently for much longer. Not because the artifacts are rare, because they're ordinary. A dented spoon, a worn boot, a faded family photograph. War is often remembered through weapons. Its true story is usually found among the belongings people hope to carry home. You sometimes wonder whether future generations will understand. Not the dates. Those are easy to memorize. April 16th, April 30th, May 2nd, May 8th. Anyone can learn those. The harder lesson is understanding how ordinary people slowly become trapped inside extraordinary disasters. Wars rarely begin with everyone expecting catastrophe. They begin, one decision at a time, one compromise, one excuse, one promise that violence will solve problems faster than patience. History has seen that pattern more than once. An old saying claims that history repeats itself. It doesn't. Not exactly. History changes its clothes. It speaks different languages. It marches beneath different flags. But human nature has a remarkable memory for old mistakes. That's why places like Berlin matter. Not because they celebrate victory, because they warn against certainty, against hatred, against believing that one group of people matters less than another. Late in life, someone asks you another question. If you could forget everything that happened, would you? The answer surprises even you. You think for a long time, then quietly shake your head. No, not because the memories are pleasant. They're not. Many still wake you in the middle of the night. Many still hurt. But forgetting would also mean forgetting the people who never returned. The friends whose names no longer appear in newspapers. The civilians who disappeared beneath the rubble. The children who deserved better. Memory can be painful. Sometimes, it's also a responsibility. The sun begins setting over Berlin once again. Golden light reflects from the Reichstag's glass dome. Nearby, children chase pigeons across the lawn. Office workers hurry toward the train station. Tourists unfold maps. Street musicians begin playing for evening crowds. Life, ordinary, peaceful, beautiful life, fills a place where artillery once shook the ground. And perhaps, there is no greater tribute to those who lived through the battle than that. Because cities are meant for conversations, not bombardments. For music, not machine guns. For children, not trenches. As darkness settles, Berlin glows with thousands of lights. Not fires, lights, warm windows, restaurants, homes. A city alive, exactly as every city should be. And somewhere, far beyond the pages of history, the echoes of April 1945 finally begin to fade. Not because they no longer matter, but because they succeeded in teaching the lesson they were always meant to leave behind. That peace, fragile though it may be, is always worth protecting. Every year, there are fewer people left who remember Berlin, not from books, not from documentaries, not from faded black and white photographs. They remember it because they were there. The soldier who crossed the Oder River, the nurse who treated wounded civilians beneath collapsing ceilings, the young boy who carried buckets of water through burning streets, the woman who spent weeks searching the ruins for her family. One by one, their voices grow quieter, not because their stories matter less, because time never stops moving. You notice it yourself. The faces at veterans' reunions become fewer each year. The chairs around the table slowly empty. Someone who always told the funniest stories is suddenly missing. Another friend, gone. Another familiar laugh, heard for the last time. Eventually, you stop counting. When you're young, history feels enormous, ancient, far away. But eventually, you realize something strange. One day, you become history. Children visit schools where old veterans sometimes speak. The teachers introduce them with respect. The students listen politely. Some are fascinated. Others struggle to imagine a world without mobile phones, without television, without peace. You don't blame them. That's exactly the world you hoped they would inherit. A small hand rises. A little girl asks, "Were the people on the other side evil?" The room becomes very quiet. It's a difficult question, not because you don't know the answer, because simple answers often become dangerous. You clear your throat, then gently reply. Some were, but most were frightened. They were sons, fathers, brothers. They were people. The teacher nods silently. The children think about that, perhaps longer than they'll remember any date in the textbook. War has a terrible habit of convincing ordinary people that other ordinary people are somehow different. History keeps proving the opposite. Whether you spoke German, Russian, English, or Polish, fear sounded remarkably similar. So did grief. So did hope. Sometimes, Reporters ask you what victory felt like. They expect excitement, relief, triumph. Instead, you tell them something unexpected. It felt quiet. They look confused. You explain. When you've listened to gunfire every day, silence becomes the loudest sound in the world. Years later, scientists begin studying trauma. Psychologists finally give names to wounds that can't be seen. People begin understanding that survival doesn't always mean healing. For decades, millions had carried invisible injuries without language to describe them. Now, at least, they're no longer completely alone. One afternoon, your grandson asks if you'd like to watch an old war movie with him. You agree. The explosions are spectacular. The music is dramatic. The heroes charge fearlessly into battle. When the credits roll, he smiles. Was it really like that? You sit quietly for a long moment. Then you shake your head. No, it was colder, hungrier, slower, and much quieter. Between the explosions, he nods, not fully understanding. How could he? That's not a failure. It's a blessing. Outside, the evening breeze moves gently through the trees. The world you've lived long enough to see is imperfect. There are still conflicts, still hatred, still people convinced that violence can solve what wisdom cannot. But there is also something else. Generations who grew up never hearing Berlin burn. Generations free to argue, to vote, to travel, to dream. That future was never guaranteed. Someone had to survive long enough to build it. As night falls, you close the old wooden box one final time. Inside are the letters, the photographs, the medals, the memories. Not treasures, responsibilities. Because someday, someone else will open that box. Someone born decades after the smoke cleared. And through those simple objects, they'll discover something remarkable. That history isn't just made by famous leaders or decisive battles. It's carried quietly, from one generation to the next, one story at a time. Every city has a memory, not the kind written in books, the kind hidden beneath its streets, inside its buildings, behind its quiet mornings. Berlin remembers, even if most people no longer hear it. Stand on a bridge over the River Spree. Watch the boats drift beneath you. Listen to conversations floating from nearby cafes. The city feels calm, comfortable, alive. It's difficult to imagine that 80 years ago, these same waters carried floating debris, collapsed timber, and sometimes, the victims of a city tearing itself apart. The river kept flowing then, just as it does now. Nature has no opinion about history. Only people remember. You walk through neighborhoods rebuilt so completely, they seem untouched by war. Fresh trees line the streets. Apartment windows reflect the afternoon sun. Children race home from school carrying backpacks instead of gas masks. Dogs bark behind garden fences. Someone is watering flowers. It all feels ordinary, the kind of ordinary people spent years dreaming about. But every so often, the past quietly reaches the surface. Construction workers begin digging foundations for a new building. Their machines suddenly stop. The ground has revealed another unexploded bomb. Even now, decades after the war ended, Berlin still uncovers thousands of wartime explosives. The city pauses. Experts arrive. Nearby streets are evacuated. Hours later, life resumes. Another reminder that history is never quite as far away as we'd like to believe. Museums preserve the grand story. Maps, documents, military plans, photographs of ruined streets. But sometimes, the smallest objects tell the biggest truths. A cracked teacup, a child's marble, a wedding ring recovered from rubble, a pocket watch frozen forever at the moment its owner fell. Those objects ask questions that history books rarely can. Who held this? Who waited for them to come home? Did anyone ever learn what happened? The older you become, the less interested you are in battles. Instead, you find yourself thinking about mornings. Ordinary mornings. A father walking to work. A mother making breakfast. Children complaining about school. History often remembers the day those moments disappeared. It rarely pauses to appreciate how precious they were before they vanished. One evening, your granddaughter sits beside you. She has a school assignment about the Second World War. She asks if you'll help. You smile. Together, you spread photographs across the kitchen table. She points to one. Is that Berlin? You nod. It doesn't look real. No, you quietly reply. It didn't feel real either. She studies the image for another moment. Rows of shattered buildings. Smoke. Broken streets. Then she looks out the window, toward the peaceful neighborhood outside. It's hard to believe. You smile gently. That's a good thing. She doesn't understand why you said that. Maybe someday. She will. History has an unusual way of fading. Not all at once. One memory at a time. The soldiers grow old. The nurses disappear. The children who survive become grandparents. Eventually, there is no one left who remembers firsthand. From that moment onward, everything depends on stories. Stories become bridges between generations, between memory and forgetting. That's why people keep writing books, making documentaries, restoring photographs, recording interviews, not to glorify war, but to preserve the voices before silence claims them forever. Because once the witnesses are gone, the responsibility quietly passes to everyone else. As night settles over Berlin, the city sparkles beneath thousands of lights. Cars move steadily along wide avenues. Music drifts from open restaurant doors. Friends laugh together beneath summer skies. The sound carries effortlessly through streets that once echoed with artillery. If cities could dream, perhaps this is exactly what Berlin dreamed of during those terrible days in 1945. Not victory, not revenge, simply peace. And in the quiet rhythm of ordinary life, it finally found it. There's a strange moment. After every great storm, the rain stops, the wind fades, and for a while, the world doesn't quite know how to be quiet again. Berlin experienced that moment. In May of 1945, the gunfire had ended. The tanks had stopped moving. The smoke slowly drifted into the spring sky. But silence didn't immediately bring peace. It brought questions, millions of them. Where do we sleep? Where do we find food? Who survived? Who didn't? When will the trains run again? Will there still be schools? Hospitals? Electricity? Will life ever feel normal? For the people who remained, survival became a different kind of battle. One fought without rifles, without artillery, without uniforms. It was a battle against hunger, disease, loneliness, and uncertainty. Entire districts had become fields of broken stone. Roads disappeared beneath mountains of rubble. Water pipes had burst. Power stations lay in ruins. Many families cooked whatever little food they could find over small fires built between collapsed walls. Sometimes, they shared with complete strangers, not because they had enough, because they knew exactly what it felt like to have nothing. You walk through streets that no longer have names. Street signs are gone. Landmarks have vanished. Even the map inside your head no longer matches reality. You recognize a church only because part of its tower still stands. You find an old bakery, not because of the building, but because the smell of fresh bread once drifted down this street every morning. Now, there is only dust. Days turn into weeks. Weeks become months. Slowly, the impossible begins to happen. A shop opens. Just one. People line up outside. Not because there's much to buy, because seeing a shop open again means someone believes tomorrow will come. Soon, another shop opens. Then another. A barber. A tailor. A tiny cafe serving weak coffee. And hope. Children begin playing games in empty lots where tanks once stood. Their laughter sounds almost unfamiliar, as though the city itself is remembering what joy feels like. The railway stations begin breathing again, not with soldiers, with workers, families, students, travelers carrying suitcases instead of ammunition. The sound of a train arriving once meant reinforcements. Now, it means possibility. You find work helping clear rubble. The labor is exhausting. You lift broken bricks, one after another, for hours. Sometimes, you stop and wonder who once lived inside the walls you've just dismantled. Did children celebrate birthdays here? Did someone play the piano by that window? Did a family once gather around a dinner table? Exactly where you're standing now. War destroys buildings. Recovery uncovers lives. One afternoon, you discover a photograph trapped beneath a fallen beam. The faces are faded. A mother, a father, two little boys, all smiling. You don't know their names. You never will. You carefully place the photograph on a nearby wall, where perhaps someone searching might recognize it. Small acts of kindness begin rebuilding the city. Long before the concrete does, the seasons continue changing. Spring becomes summer. Summer becomes autumn. Grass slowly pushes through cracks in broken pavement. Birds build nests inside damaged buildings. Trees bloom again, without asking whether the war is over. Nature never waits for history to catch up. Years from now, people will call Berlin one of the greatest reconstruction stories in modern history. They'll admire its architecture, its culture, its resilience. But standing here, covered in dust, lifting another brick, you aren't thinking about history. You're simply trying to build one more ordinary tomorrow. Because after everything you've seen, you've learned something that no battlefield could ever teach. The greatest victories are rarely won by destroying cities. They're won by finding the strength to rebuild them. History is selective. It remembers great leaders, famous speeches, decisive battles. It remembers the day never stopped helping others, the frightened civilians who still managed to smile. After enough years, the battles themselves begin to fade. The people never do. Memory is a curious thing. You forget the names of streets. You forget dates. You forget exactly how long certain battles lasted. But you never forget the smell of smoke after rain, the sound of boots crunching over broken glass, the warmth of a cup of tea, shared in complete silence. Some memories don't ask permission to stay. They simply never leave. As historians continue studying Berlin, new documents appear. Old photographs are discovered in forgotten attics. Letters arrive in museums from families sorting through inherited belongings. Every generation uncovers another small piece of the larger story. History is never completely finished. It's always being remembered. Sometimes, people ask whether humanity has learned from wars like this. You wish the answer were simple. The decades after Berlin brought remarkable peace to much of Europe. Former enemies became trading partners. Borders opened. Young people crossed countries that their grandparents once crossed. With rifles. That alone would have seemed impossible in 1945. Yet elsewhere, new conflicts emerged. New cities suffered. New generations discovered that war always promises more than it ever delivers. Perhaps that is why stories matter. Not because they can erase the past. Nothing can. But because they remind us what the past actually cost. Not in territory, not in politics, in people. Always. People. As evening settles, you sit quietly on your porch. The sky glows with soft shades of orange. Somewhere nearby, a radio plays gentle music. Children ride bicycles down the street. Their parents call them home for dinner. The ordinary rhythm of life continues, completely unaware of how extraordinary it truly is. You smile, because you know something they don't. Peace isn't ordinary. It's earned, protected, and far more fragile than it appears. Long after the last soldier has gone, long after the ruins have disappeared, long after the final witness has fallen silent, the greatest legacy of Berlin will not be found in its monuments, or its museums, or even its history books. It will be found every single day that another child grows up, never having to hear the sound of a city at war. Victory is a strange word. From a distance, it sounds glorious. It brings to mind cheering crowds, waving flags, bands playing triumphant music, and smiling faces. But when you've stood inside a city like Berlin, victory feels different, quieter. heavier, more complicated, because even the winning side counted its dead. Every celebration was missing someone. Every family photograph had an empty place at the table. Every toast was quietly dedicated to people who would never raise another glass. You remember the faces, far more clearly than the maps. The young lieutenant who carried a photograph of his newborn daughter. The elderly woman who insisted on sharing half her loaf of bread, despite having almost nothing herself. The frightened teenager in a German uniform, who looked far too young to be holding a rifle. War had given each of them different uniforms, different languages, different flags. But beneath all of that, they were simply human. As the years pass, new buildings rise across Berlin. Steel replaces shattered brick. Glass replaces broken windows. Parks bloom where artillery once thundered. Entire neighborhoods are reborn. Visitors admire the city's modern skyline, never realizing how impossible it once seemed. If someone had stood among the ruins in May of 1945 and described the Berlin of today, few would have believed them. Hope often sounds unrealistic until it becomes reality. You visit the city once more, not to remember the battle, to see what came afterward. You walk through streets that once existed only as piles of rubble. Children hurry past carrying school books. Musicians perform in public squares. Street cafes spill onto sidewalks filled with conversation. The smell of fresh bread drifts from a nearby bakery. You stop walking, close your eyes, and breathe deeply. This is what everyone was fighting for. Not destruction, not conquest. A morning where bread smells like bread again. People often imagine history as a series of dramatic turning points. A single speech, one famous battle, a decisive victory. But history usually changes. Very slowly. One brick, one family, one classroom, one rebuilt bridge, one peaceful morning at a time. A historian once writes that the Battle of Berlin ended the war in Europe. Technically, he's right. But standing here, that sentence feels incomplete. The battle ended the war. The people ended the suffering. By rebuilding, by forgiving, by choosing to live beside memories, instead of being ruled by them. That required a different kind of courage, one that rarely earns medals. Sometimes, you wonder what became of the people whose paths briefly crossed yours. The little girl clutching her mother's hand. The medic who disappeared into another street. The soldier who shared a cigarette with you beneath a collapsed staircase. Did they survive? Did they build families? Did they grow old? History seldom answers those questions. Life simply moves forward, leaving us to imagine the endings we never witnessed. As twilight settles over Berlin, the lights begin appearing one by one. Apartment windows glow softly. Restaurants fill with laughter. Trains arrive precisely on schedule. The city hums with the comforting sound of ordinary life. There is no greater monument to peace than people forgetting to be afraid. You take one final look across the skyline, not searching for ruins. There are almost none left. Not searching for reminders of war. There are enough museums for that. Instead, you look at the people, walking home from work, meeting friends, holding hands, planning tomorrow. Without realizing it, they have become the greatest victory that Berlin could ever claim. Because the true measure of peace isn't found in treaties, or memorials, or history books. It's found in millions of ordinary lives, lived without fear. And after everything Berlin endured, that may be the most extraordinary ending history could have written. There comes a moment in every lifetime when you realize the world no longer belongs to your generation. It belongs to those who came after. You notice it gradually. The children you once watched playing in the streets now have children of their own. The young soldiers who survived the war have become old men with silver hair and slow steps. The photographs on your wall contain more people who are gone than people still living. Time has quietly done what no army ever could. It has marched forward without stopping. One autumn afternoon, you receive an invitation. A local school is holding a ceremony. They want veterans to attend. to speak, to remember. You hesitate. You've spent a lifetime trying not to think about Berlin. Now, someone is asking you to revisit it. One final time. The school gymnasium is full. Children whisper to one another. Teachers arrange chairs. Parents hold cameras. Everything feels so wonderfully ordinary. You wait quietly at the side of the room, holding your cane, wondering whether anything you say could possibly matter. When your name is called, the room applauds. You slowly make your way to the front. You look across hundreds of young faces, bright eyes, curious minds, children who have never known war. Exactly as it should be. You begin speaking, not about battles, not about tactics, not about famous generals. Instead, you tell them about hunger, about friendship, about fear, about the old woman who insisted on sharing her soup with complete strangers, about the little boy who smiled, even though his city had disappeared around him. You tell them that courage rarely looks dramatic. Most of the time, it simply looks like getting up. One more day? When you finish, the room is silent. Then, a train arriving on time. A family gathered around a dinner table. These ordinary moments are the true opposite of war. Not victory, not surrender. Simply, life. As evening settles over Berlin and over countless other cities once scarred by conflict, lights appear in windows. Families eat together. Friends tell stories. Children fall asleep without hearing sirens or artillery or the distant rumble of tanks. And somewhere, an old veteran smiles quietly, because after everything he witnessed, this ordinary evening is still the greatest miracle he has ever lived to see. One day, without anyone realizing it, the last survivor will tell their story for the final time. There won't be a ceremony. There won't be cameras. No newspaper will know that history has quietly crossed another threshold. An elderly man or woman will simply finish speaking, close an old photograph album, smile at a grandchild, and somewhere, without fanfare, the living memory of Berlin will become history alone. That day is coming. Every year, the voices grow fewer. The people who actually walked those shattered streets, who breathed the smoke, who waited through endless nights wondering if morning would ever arrive, are becoming incredibly rare. Soon, there will be none left. And then, the responsibility changes. It becomes ours, not to relive the past, not to remain trapped inside it, but to remember it honestly, without glorifying it, without simplifying it, without forgetting the people hidden between the headlines. Because history has an unfortunate habit. If enough time passes, wars begin looking exciting again. Old photographs become fascinating. Uniforms become collectibles. Battles become maps covered with colorful arrows. It's easy to admire history once the suffering has faded. Much harder to remember what those arrows actually meant. Every line on a battlefield map crossed somebody's home. Every advance left empty chairs behind. Every victory came with grieving families. You sometimes hear people describe war as an adventure. You quietly shake your head. Adventure ends when you decide to go home. War decides that for you. The memories become softer now, not smaller, just less sharp. The faces remain. The fear remains. But time has wrapped them inside something gentler. Acceptance. You no longer wake every night. The dreams visit less often. When they do, they usually aren't about explosions anymore. They're about people, conversations, small kindnesses, the ordinary moments that somehow survived. Inside extraordinary darkness, one spring afternoon, you visit a memorial. Fresh flowers rest beneath engraved names. A young family stands nearby. Their little boy asks his father, "Who are these people?" His father kneels beside him. "They helped give us the life we have today." The boy looks at the names, then quietly places a small flower beside them. No one asked him to. He simply thought. It seemed right. You feel your eyes grow wet. Not from sadness, from relief. Perhaps the next generation understands more than we sometimes think. The sun begins setting. Its warm light stretches across the memorial stones. For a moment, everything is completely still. No engines, no shouting, no sirens, only birds singing. The same songs they were singing long before the war and long after it ended. Nature has always believed peace is normal. Perhaps we should too. As you slowly walk away, you realize something. The purpose of remembering Berlin was never to preserve hatred. It was never to celebrate victory. It was never even to mourn forever. The purpose was to remind every generation what becomes possible when ordinary people stop seeing one another as human beings. Stories cannot rebuild destroyed cities. They cannot bring back the dead. They cannot erase suffering. But they can accomplish one remarkable thing. They can carry memory across time, from someone who lived it to someone who never will. And sometimes that is enough, because if memory survives, perhaps wisdom can survive with it. And if wisdom survives, then maybe, just maybe, history won't need to teach the same lesson again. The city sleeps, not because there is nothing left to remember, but because, at long last, there is nothing left to fear. Night settles gently over Berlin. Streetlights reflect across the river Spree. The Reichstag stands quietly beneath the stars. Trains glide through stations exactly on time. People finish late dinners. Friends laugh as they walk home. Somewhere, a window opens. Someone waters flowers growing in a balcony garden. Another ordinary evening. The kind of evening millions once believed they would never see again. If you close your eyes, you can almost hear another Berlin. The Berlin of April 1945. The distant thunder of artillery. The crash of collapsing walls. The hurried footsteps of civilians running toward shelters. The cries of medics. The rumble of tanks moving through shattered streets. For weeks, those sounds defined the city. Now, they exist only in memory. Memory is a curious thing. It never asks permission before returning. A familiar smell, a song on the radio, a certain evening light. Suddenly, you're back there again, standing among broken buildings, wondering if tomorrow will ever arrive. Then, you open your eyes. The smoke is gone. The war is over. And tomorrow did arrive. Perhaps that is history's greatest miracle. Not that humanity survives war. We always have. The miracle is that humanity somehow finds the strength to become ordinary again, to build schools instead of bunkers, homes instead of fortresses, playgrounds instead of battlefields, to choose life again and again. The Battle of Berlin marked the end of the European war, but its legacy reaches far beyond military history. It reminds us how quickly civilizations can unravel when hatred is allowed to grow unchecked. It reminds us what ordinary people are capable of, both at their worst and at their very best. It reminds us that courage is often quiet, that resilience is rarely dramatic, and that peace is never something to take for granted. Tonight, the streets are peaceful. Children sleep safely in their beds. Parents make plans for tomorrow. Students worry about exams. Workers think about the week ahead. These concerns may seem small, almost insignificant, but to someone who survived Berlin, they are extraordinary because they are the concerns of people who expect to have a tomorrow. If you've traveled through this story, from the frozen banks of the Oder, through the Seelow Heights, into the burning streets of Berlin, through the Reichstag, the bunker, the surrender, and finally, into the quiet years that followed, then you've witnessed more than the end of a war. You've witnessed the resilience of ordinary people, not the generals, not the dictators, not the politicians, but the mothers who protected their children, the medics who refused to stop helping, the workers who rebuilt broken cities, the soldiers who simply wanted to go home. History is often told through the decisions of powerful men, but it is endured by ordinary people. It always has been. One final time, you look across the Berlin skyline. The city glows peacefully beneath the night sky. No flames, no smoke, no searchlights, only warm windows. stretching toward the horizon. Somewhere beneath those lights, families are sharing dinner. Children are dreaming. Neighbors are saying goodnight. Life, beautiful, ordinary life, has returned. And perhaps that is the ending every city deserves. Not victory, not defeat, not glory, simply peace. So as the lights fade and the streets grow quiet, leave Berlin, not remembering the explosions or the ruins or the men who fought. Remember instead what came after: the rebuilding, the forgiveness, the determination to create a better world from the ashes of the old one. Because in the end, the greatest lesson Berlin leaves behind isn't how wars are won, it's how peace must be protected every single day. Good night, Berlin, and may your streets never again have to remember the sound of war.